Hello, Heiner. Hello, Barry. Unmute, please.
All right. Did I click the wrong button or did it glitch on for some other reason?
What glitch are you referring to?
Just as you started recurring, the window vanished. And I had to restart. I might have clicked the wrong thing. I don't know. I mean, or maybe, who knows?
Well, I clicked one button and for both you and Heiner got in. Where are you right now?
Sometimes my mouse does erratic things, you know, that I didn't do. So who knows? Hi, Heiner.
Hi.
Well, since you mentioned the mouse, I actually think the mouse is a great invention, but it's like a tricycle.
In what way?
In that, if you want something that's easy to learn and get you, a short distance, tricycle is perfect, right?
Especially short distance, right?
But if you want to go cross town, if you want to go cross country, I wouldn't take a tricycle.
Doesn't have endurance. It's pragmatic for a short distance, effective for a short distance, but doesn't have endurance for the long haul.
So that's what I'm saying is a mouse is very easy, kind of intuitive for people to deal with. But for really fast, operations, it really slows you down. So keyboard only UIs are advantageous in those ways. Just noticing.
It was so hard for me to learn how to use a mouse. I just got to tell you.
Oh, really?
That did not work with my head at all. I did not want to use it. I like the touch screen.
What year was that you got introduced to the mouse? Just FYI, FMI.
2000, I don't know, 2000. I came late to the computer party. 96.
2096?
I mean, 1996.
I'm just kidding, Stacy. Interesting. Because how many of you guys remember the very first Macintosh?
I just been born.
What year was that?
1984.
That's right. You guys remember the advertisement that Apple used to launch it?
I remember one of them where the people were taking theirs, bringing theirs in from home instead of taking the ones home from the office. That's one of the ads.
That's not the most famous ad.
Well, the
Heiner,
very
you
first
remember
one,
you were
the
around
one
in
was only
those
shot
ages.
once on the football ad with the from the movie 1984, the guy in the black and white.
That was the
on
one.
screen
That was the advertisement that made the Macintosh.
was shown
in
once.
black and
Was shown once, right? On
It quickly gained a cult following. I don't think it was shown only once.
it was on the Super Bowl.
And it had a young track and field athlete basically doing a hammer throw
Yeah,
right
he
into
threw a hammer
that
throw at the screen. Yeah.
Heiner, you remember that, right?
I just say hello and bye-bye. I'm not ready for his times what Doug Elbar did about the mouse, because they also spoke about the dolphin. And I think the mouse and the rat are three-dimensional. They're navigating in three-dimensional space. But I'm here only for 10 or maximum 50 minutes to really tell you I enjoy talking to you and we should focus.
That is one of the themes here. By the way, Colin, since you're here, I want to thank you for pointing out that one little segment, I forget in which particular episode, where I did summarize what were like 5 key themes I had around GCC. But since Heiner mentioned focus, let's focus. We had an agenda for today. How many of you people do not remember the agenda? Raise your hands, please. Okay, everybody remembers the agenda. Okay. Who would like to recap the agenda just to see if we play this telephone game? Anybody want to restate the agenda for today? Glenn, there you go.
Hey, good to see you guys. I believe the agenda is to come with a couple of suggestions for useful practices in the GCC barn racing meetings.
Is that it? There's a little bit more than that.
Well, you asked us to write something, and we wrote down in Zulu. It was a lively discussion. Many topics came up, so still getting to know Zulu, using it. But and of course, yeah, it was also obviously to look at last week that we looked through the video, the last part of the video where it was a reaction, and see if we can make sense of that. Was that what you had in mind? And
Yes.
to make a suggestion that could be helpful in regards to those kind
Yes.
of situations. Yeah, that's
Thank you, Glenn. In fact, I believe that of all the people here, Heiner, you were probably the only person not there last week at the tail end of the session. Is that right? I think everybody else was, if I remember right.
I think I was, but I put my video off.
So did you hear Barry's behavior where he thought he was pushing photons through an opaque filter?
Yes, I think I somehow revisited, but I must tell you, I only have 5 minutes left. I have very strong concerns about Barry's behavior and who is the other guy? Colin's behavior. I think we have to really become productive. I never understood why is Barry so much focused and why what is his name? Colin is behaving like this. We have to come into sync. And this sync means we have to see differences and cultures and episodes. And what I observed with one of them talking, he said, "Why are you always talking?" And he said, "Well, I'm adding quality to what you said." And so this is the very self-centered perspective. On the other side with Barry, I said to him, why are you losing time? And he said, no, it is a structural problem. It is not a personal problem. I think we have to come to ways, and I mentioned it with you before, not every state in public. So when I want to have my grandson or my son to tell him to look different and to behave, I don't want it on public radio. I really am concerned what is the mission of really gaining knowledge using artificial intelligence with a lot of apostrophes to really help us find something we didn't realize in a recorded session, and what we are doing here in a learning journey. And I feel we should breath deep and have more tolerance, and especially taking our viewpoint out that someone is telling me, well, I have to interrupt you because I'm adding quality. You see, this is something I never experienced anywhere else. I have only 4 minutes left, but I might be listening for you at the moment. You know, I'm in different worlds. Sorry, and I always enjoy to be with you.
Okay, I have a response to Heiner. Anyone else?
I liked what he said.
Go ahead.
I liked what he said.
Yes, I do too. Okay, so let me go then, because Heiner is not going to be here very long. Heiner, I think I agree with just about everything you said, except for the word sync, S-Y-N-C, if I heard it right. Okay, so if we look at all of us, and we're all different engines, you know, operating for different purposes at different speeds with different propulsion systems, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, just take this really wild metaphor and say, okay, we're trying to mesh our gears, okay? One spinning this way, one spinning this way, or one spinning this way, and we're trying to mesh, okay? I think it's ideal, wonderful, if we could all sync those gears, but before we do, can we not grind them to, you know, some kind of mess? Can we actually have some sort of a mechanism that has a gear shift or some kind of a, what was a proper mechanical word? There's probably a good word for something that adjusts when you're trying to shift the gears. So anyway,
You need
sorry, I couldn't hear that, Heiner.
you need a gearbox.
Gearbox, right. So what I'm saying is, can we find a way for all these engines, all these gears to still be coexisting rather than requiring that they squash up and synchronize? Can we at least figure out whether those gearboxes, those engines can all just be purring away, humming away, doing whatever they're trying to do, and over time, slowly fit those gears, you know, to some sort of a way where you can actually have a transmission that works?
I understand you. This incremental idea is great. I had problems with my first wife for 20 years because I was running 10,000 rotation RPM, rotation per minute, and she was 10 rotation per minute, and she was better and she was fine. And I envy that I couldn't synchronize back to her. So you see, my work was harmonization, comparabilities, not compatibilities. The T idea of standardization, of harmonization, to bridge issues. But that
Okay.
needs to step and to have harmony. And this really is a very important issue. How can we really bridge the incomparable things when we are really not having the same words and the same cultures? Sorry, I have to. But
Heiner, no, you're not allowed to go yet. I need one more question from you, Heiner. Okay. I asked for 2 very specific proposals, and I guess you've put yourself into a special position. Did you come with 2 very specific proposals of what you would recommend we discuss and or adopt here in GCC? Do you have 1 or 2?
Yes, I said we should really go out of the hamster wheel of either or, but between and beyond, and have a micro and a meso and macro and intersectoral, intercultural view at the same time, and not fight over position and put ourselves in as we are gods, we know we have to travel to Cyprus or Ceylon or wherever, but really reflect and subsume and resonate.
I think I recognize the words, but I don't understand what was said. So unfortunate. Okay, was that one proposal or was that two proposals?
I interpret that as a mindset.
Yeah. So I know it's full of errors, but I just captured what I could out of what Heiner was saying. Okay, so those of us that are here, I assume we don't have such a tight time constraint here, right? Actually, before we go in, does anybody actually feel an urge to check in before we launch into the topic?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
Because
Christine?
while you were talking, I just had to go on Google to make sure that my metaphor for your mechanical thing fit in. So before I lose it, I was going to say that sometimes we need to recognize that some people are good gears and some need to be ball bearings. So I just had to look up ball bearings first to make sure it was what I thought it was.
And oil.
I think that's a good distinction right there about the different parts. And in the GCC, I saw it as a Venn diagram where there's different people in the village or around the town square. And so if they're ball bearings or gears or whatever type of boundaries they have around their laboratory or their garden or their story mill or their dream factory or, you know.
But they may be a ball bearing in one situation with one group of people and a gear with another group of people.
Totally.
So I also wouldn't lock anybody
totally.
in.
It depends on the nuance and I guess in the generalities, because if you're in a group of software developers, you know, one guy might be the DB guy, one guy might, you know, work on the front end, so to speak. But if you're the only tech guy, you might have to do both.
Okay.
And cut some corners because no one's paying for it.
Okay, Alex has his finger up, and I also have a response. However, we're getting a
I do have a
bit off
check-in
topic.
thing though. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, because Colin responded to your check-in, which is
The check-in that I wanted to bring with me is I wasn't sure how to deal with a certain situation. Somebody had sent something in a letter that I believe is something that I could share. It was like a chain letter, and it was, you know, a quote that I wanted to use to start a conversation. And I'm just not sure how that works on Facebook. I didn't have time to ask him, can I quote you? But I wanted to use it. I mean, I wanted to use it. On one hand, I feel not mentioning the name is like taking credit away from somebody. And on another hand, I feel that, well, maybe they wouldn't want me to use their words. In this case, it wouldn't be that they wouldn't want me to use their words. It might be that it wasn't their words. I'm not sure if they were quoting someone else. So my question is about etiquette on Facebook and about sharing someone else's written words. If it was on Facebook, I don't have a problem, but because it came, this is a Facebook acquaintance, but it came through a private email chain. So that sort of confused me. So that was my check-in. And if I get the opportunity, I'll probably just present an idea without reading the words, which would have made it easier.
okay. So let's note that I'm personally parking that
Okay.
for subsequent follow-up. Okay, anyone else like to check in? Alex,
How's my audio working all right?
good.
Good.
I'm thinking about this oil, or this oil that makes the group or the mechanics of the efforts of the group run smoothly. And I think it's all to do with the agreement. And I'm willing to put my name on this agreement. I'm wondering how many others are willing to put their name in a database which is highly visible to the GCC, which is the agreement to do anything you can possibly do that will help the process. The agreement to be one of the team, the agreement to be a member of the team, willing to put time and value into the agreement. So this is the oil that I think is highly sought after and much needed. It's a high quality oil for the machine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Excellent.
my
I
check.
think we're probably going to revisit that during this session. That's my
And check. And I wanted to promise. I promised last week I'd show you some of this model that I'm constructing. That's a section of the wall. So triangles, all triangles.
Is that going to be kind of a Pokeball?
Slowly coming together into a hexadecimal dome. Sorry, a geodesic dome.
Yeah. So
What size is it going to be? Like
It's quite big.
10 feet?
It's a model, yeah, but it's about 2 feet high.
2 feet.
So I can hold it like this. I can hold it like this, and you'll see it all on the screen.
okay.
Well, that's a great hobby.
All right. If I may I suggest that the people who were here last week, in particular the observers, those of you who actually observed the video again, reviewed it after, I posted it, and those who actually did review it once or more, and I think that would be Alex, Glenn, and Stacy, okay, go first and give kind of an assessment of what actually happened and at what point did things actually, I use the phrase go off the rails, but I'm not sure that's a good phrase, but at what point did things get, let's say, outside the bounds of normal discourse / civil dialogue, civil conversation that we would like to see in GCC? At what point did that happen? And what brought that event? And what would you propose? Actually, no, let's just stop there. Just with what happened and what brought that event before we get to the actual proposal. Let's just cover that part. So just Alex, Glenn, and Stacy, what happened and what brought that to reality? Would any of you like to go first? Glenn, I see you preparing. How about Glenn, Alex, and then Stacy?
Okay. Well, I did review the thing. I actually saw most of the whole conversation plus the after meeting. So what happened? It was a little bit surprising just there and then, but in the context of many previous conversations, it might make some more sense. There was a conversation going on. Me and Colin especially involved, speaking about some very big, complex matters. The question of proof came up, question of definitions came up. And as I heard it, it was something, Barry had a reaction to us using different definitions and there being an asymmetry in how we viewed them. And the way I would say it was that I had defined how I used the term, Barry had defined how he used the term, then Colin didn't seem to recognize that definition, or he responded with a different definition, which was elaborated in the Zulip thread a little earlier. And that different definition didn't seem to have relevance to what we were talking about. And that's how I would view it. So the general gist of it was this sense of there not being an understanding of each other. And the second episode was where Colin made an assumption about why Barry said what he did. And he very quickly answered, he can say why he said what he did, doesn't need others to make that assumption. So there was a few assumptions about what others mean, which were wrong, I guess, not based on a sufficient understanding, and a frustration expressed from this misunderstanding, which has appeared several times before. It's sort of a common theme that one person defines what they mean by a concept, they present an idea, another person responds with their own definition, which is completely different and seems to just ignore the previous definition, which has already been offered. So basically a question of not really listening and not really understanding one another. I think that's the issue that I picked up. Yeah. You are on mute, Sam.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Glenn. Alex, would you like to give your take on what happened, what brought it to happen?
I zoned out. When things like that happen, I do have a tendency to zone out, and say, oh, I'm not listening to that crap. It's a discordant conversation that has collapsed. They're no longer being rational and civil.
At what point did you decide that, though?
I zoned out when somebody raised their voice, but before that, I couldn't hear anything demeaning because it wasn't directed at me. It was Colin talking about Barry. He was saying things that Barry said, "Don't put words in my mouth." So whatever Barry was talking about wasn't getting through to Colin, and then there was a reaction. And I didn't focus in on what the actual trigger was. I didn't know what the trigger was really. It was something that I have to go back and have another look at to figure it out, because I couldn't figure it out. Okay. Really.
So just a quick question then: did you review the video after it got posted, or do you go from memory of the instance?
I saw it again, but I still didn't figure it out.
Okay.
I couldn't pin it down to one specific incident. It was like something that had been building up over time.
Okay.
Over.
Thanks, Alex. Ms. Druss, what's your take?
Well, so I feel guilty. I did not review the video.
I'm sorry.
I do know that I tuned out before Alex did, because I started hearing what I knew was from previous conversations. So to me, I was able to feel that this was the same old stuff coming up, the same misunderstandings between both parties. What actually caught my attention is when I did hear the explosion. And that was like really shocking. That's when I started tuning back in. And, I'll share here because I said it elsewhere. I actually sent Barry a private message asking him if he was really that upset or if this was to provoke something. And I'll let him answer the question, but the fact that I felt compelled to write that should give you an idea of where my head was at.
Did you hear the second instance later on that day?
Later on that day?
Yes.
No, at that point, I was done for, I finished for the day. I'm trying not to spend too much time engaged in these kinds of things because, as you know, I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that various people have observed that, and partly in response to that, but, partly for other, I think, better reasons. I do want to understand this.
What
was that,
second
Glenn?
instance? What second instance were you thinking about?
I couldn't hear you.
What second instance did you mention?
Oh, I think Barry actually used vehemence twice that day, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but there was relatively short time between it,
Oh,
right?
there was a lot of time between them. There was at least 10 or 20 minutes, right?
Oh, but it was the same call. Yes.
Yeah.
okay.
Same day.
Yeah, it was the same call. Yeah, maybe
Right.
10 or 15 minutes.
Right, right. Okay, so may I go before Colin and Barry go? Okay. So I heard a little bit of ping ponging, right, between Colin and Glenn. And I think if I'm recalling Barry correctly, so I am projecting here, Barry, but I'm just trying to use your words, that you seem to feel that there was this pattern where a lot of time passes before you get to say something. And so I think that was building up. Then there was a reference, I think, to a definition. All that is, all that was, all that ever will be, whether it's Yahweh, whether God, whether it's something else. And that you objected that Colin did not accept your definition of that. And so I actually thought that was, in my mind, a big red flag. Red in the sense that just because it's in that spreadsheet does not imply that everybody has to adopt that definition. That was not at all the reason I put that spreadsheet together. So if you were operating under the assumption that, hey, the fact that there is a definition there means that everybody has to accept that definition, I think that's an error in communication between me and Barry, I believe, okay? So that's point number one. Point number two is, and I had this interchange with Barry, either privately or in text publicly, is that, in fact, I even said so in the session, is why feel the need to push a signal through an opaque barrier, an opaque filter, you know? Especially when Barry had already gone on record is not really caring what was on the other side of that filter. In other words, why not let it go? And Barry's response to me was, because it wastes my time, because I have to wait half an hour before I can say something. And that was a source of frustration. I did feel that the vehemence was out of line, perhaps even out of character, but I think Barry's now, done this at least 3 times that I know of, i.e. blown up at Colin. 4? Okay, 4. Okay, sorry. I'm not giving you enough credit, okay? Here goes another one. So I'm interested in what Barry feels is a productive outcome of that outburst that could not have been achieved other ways. And that was the best possible way to achieve the outcome. Dare I say, an outcome which probably did not come to pass. Okay. Now, the second time was Barry essentially thinking that Colin was putting words in his mouth. Okay. And there was a reference that could have been taken that way. But again, I think the vehemence was quite strong, stronger than necessary, perhaps. But Barry felt it was necessary. So I'm still interested in whether that's a successful strategy, Barry, that you exercise in multiple circumstances, or whether it's just specific to this one. I can't call him a conversationalist because you guys are not in conversation with each other, okay? So that's my take, is that there was a difference in interpretation of a definition. And oh, by the way, I can agree with a definition of something without believing that the thing being described in the definition actually exists. I can agree that Yahweh or God is all that was, all that is, all that ever will be. I can agree with that definition. But I can use other terms. I don't have to use that term. Because the use of a term, Yahweh or God, means that all the other references of that term, Yahweh or God, that are used in all of history and all of literature, okay, means that all of those implications and all of those alliterations and all of those references now all of a sudden pertain to this definition thing. And I'm not, I'm not okay
Ah.
with that.
Sorry, I didn't understand that.
In other words, I can accept that Barry's definition of God is all that was, all that is, all that ever will be. Fine
Yeah.
definition, fine definition. The problem is that's for Barry.
That's for this situation. That's for this
No,
conversation,
that's for
right?
Barry. Barry put
But
that
you are
definition
in
there.
conversation with Barry at that point.
Yes,
So his definition is
That's right.
relevant at that
That's right.
point.
correct, okay? However, okay, I can say, Barry, that is your definition. I don't have to say that that is my definition. Because if that is, then that word God in all the gazillion other places that it occurs now mean that those statements have validity in the context of this definition. And I'm not ready to accept that.
I
Okay,
think that's a big
About-
assumption you're making there.
no, it's not a big assumption, because if we're going to use the same word and we want to, converse meaningfully, okay, then that same word has to, in a sense, mean mostly the same thing in that conversation. Otherwise, we're talking past each other.
Yeah, but if he's defining that term, how he uses that
Right, so
term,
we're going
you
in depth
understand
now
that.
about
What
my
does that have to do
assessment.
with all the other? What does that have to do with all the other definitions? They're outside, got nothing to do with it, right?
In my view, that's not the case, okay? In my view, terms appear lots of different places. And so one that is so ubiquitous as God, so ubiquitous as Yahweh, has much behind it if you actually say this is the definition we're going to use. Because it has lots of implications, because it's got lots of references and lots of other literary works and mythical works and all other works associated with that term. And giving it validity in this definition means that that definition should apply in all of those other references. And that's what I'm not ready to do.
That I don't agree with at all. That I think that's a total mistake.
So I
because
let each of you
defines
guys
how
give
he
your
uses it
assessment.
here.
Okay,
He
Glenn, what I'm
defines how
saying
he
is,
uses it
I let
here.
each of you guys give your assessment, and then was trying to get people to take turns. You are now responding to me, which I think is fine in the general case, but in the specific case, then other people are waiting to speak. Okay. So I'm willing to engage on that. I'm just saying that other people want to speak as well.
Let's pick that up later. Yeah.
Okay, so Stacy, did you want to respond to me or Glenn, or shall we let
Yes,
Colin?
to both of you. I would, if I could just respond to both of you,
Okay,
because to me, I think I understand what you're saying, Sam. However, I only understand that when the other definitions might contradict the first. So if the first definition is so open that it will allow the other definitions to fit in, whether or not that person putting forth definition agrees, I don't see a problem with that, because it's not precluding any of the other definitions.
may I respond to that? Because now Colin and Barry have to wait, and Kayla now have to wait longer.
I find your
Finish
guys'
it.
conversation way more interesting. Continue on.
Okay,
It's worth
so let me
it.
respond to
Continue.
Stacy and Glenn, okay? If Yahweh or God refers to all that is, all that was, all that ever will be, okay? Then to assign intent or to assign preference or to assign anthropomorphic features or anthropomorphic behavior, to me, is kind of a mythical / oral tradition method of understanding all that is, all that was, all that ever will be. So to me, there's a lot of assumptions built in to that assumption when you then ascribe all these other human type behaviors and features to this God, which is clearly orders of magnitude greater in all senses and all dimensions and all implications than we mere mortals are.
But it's not the definition that's ascribing the
That is
anthropomorphic
correct.
features.
That is correct. That is why I say you cannot dissociate the definition from all the other references in language. That is a fallacy. To
You see,
say,
I guess-
okay, I'm going to accept your definition, but I'm going to ignore all of its other uses, all the other literature, that is not useful to me. It's only, a definition is only useful in the sense, only when it gives you additional insight, additional interpretation of all the other references of that term and phrase.
So I disagree, especially if the purpose of understanding these definitions is to know how we can work with other people or who we could work with. So
I
for
can
me,
work with Barry. There's no issue with me working
but,
with Barry.
and that's my point, because Barry's not saying all these things that you're saying you don't agree with. You're saying that you're uncomfortable with that definition because other people.
No. I'm not uncomfortable with it. To me, it just has no value. There's no additional utility. There's no additional understanding. There's no additional interpretation I can bring to anything by using that definition. So to me, it's a non-useful definition.
So is
For
the
me,
I don't
it's
problem-
have
an
an- I don't have
umbrella.
an issue with Barry having it. I have no issue with Barry having it. I don't need to yell at Barry by saying this is a useless definition. I don't need to do that. I just don't need to use it myself.
But don't you need to use it in that conversation?
Yes, and I do. I understand
Yeah.
when Barry says those terms, this is what Barry means. I can completely do that. And I can do that without accepting it for all these other purposes of that term.
But that's obvious.
No,
You
it's
don't
not.
have to.
No, it's not.
Yes, that's all. That's
No, it's not.
obvious.
Because the minute you accept the definition of God, somebody somewhere is going to say, oh, therefore this other reference of God implies blah, blah, blah.
That's just nonsense.
That is not
if you-
nonsense.
If
This
you
is how people
accept his
converse.
definition, yeah, but that is nonsense if they converse like that. Because if you accept that this is how he defines that term right here, then that is what you're speaking about right here. All the other cases have nothing to do with it. They have all kinds of other definitions, all kinds of other situations.
And you are
where
correct.
they
I'm
define
not
it
disagreeing with
differently.
what you say. I'm not disagreeing with what you say. All I'm saying is I don't need to use that definition when I converse with other people. I can use
Nobody's
that
forcing you
definition.
to. Nobody's
wait a minute.
forcing you to.
Barry was. Barry was pointing at Colin and saying, you put your definition there, and how come you don't accept my definition that I put there?
Was
Barry
that the
was
issue,
saying
or
that-
was it that Colin didn't even listen and hear the definition?
How do you know that?
Because
I
that's the
believe
one-
that Colin actually has on his map something that says Yahweh or God, and it says all that was, all that is, all that ever will be. I believe that's probably somewhere on one of Colin's maps.
Yeah, but I wonder if that's an issue.
I don't have a problem with discussing the sociology around the topic of myths, is what I call them. And I think Sam referred to them as stories, which to me is another synonym for the word myths, historical stories, myths, when it involves especially gods. It elevates it to, and I even spoke with Barry about maybe there's some moral value in those stories. Sam mentioned that too. So there's a lot of agreement. I agree with Glenn when he says something's happening, things are moving. So the Lego pieces are all good. It's what you do with that Lego and how you force it upon other people to say, you must play with my Lego. That's the problem.
Who's forcing? I don't see any forcing.
I did. I personally did. When Barry actually said to Colin, you don't accept my definition, so there's an asymmetry here.
And that's hypocritical because he doesn't even care what I think.
Probably
That's why-
Barry should answer.
Yes, so now it's time for, Colin did speak. So Colin, are you done? Shall we let Barry go, or do you have more?
I think you pretty well recapped the meta the way I think needs to be done. The details are all, like Stacy said.
And by the way, welcome, Kayla. Okay, Barry, would you like to give your assessment of what happened?
Yeah, there's a lot to cover, so I don't know if I can do this terribly coherently. One thing, before I forget it, the one thing I want to point out is, I think it was on Thursday, Stacy introduced an interesting characterization. She invoked a children's story, The Boy Who Cried Wolf. And The Boy Who Cried Wolf is a story. It's an Aesop fable, I think, or one of those children's stories. And it's not the boy or the crying the wolf. Those are simply an example of a practice of asserting something that is supposed to be alarming, warning people, but in fact, the assertion is bogus. And the story is that if a person does this enough times, people stop listening to the boy who cries wolf. And then when he really is a wolf, they don't pay attention. Now, it's useful to refer to this children's story because it gets the idea across very efficiently. Even though there never was an actual boy who actually cried wolf, that's a made-up story. But it has pediatric value because you can explain the idea to a child. Now, if you try to explain to a child, warning somebody about a danger when there is no danger, and doing that many, many times, you're going to lose credibility. If you try to explain that to a 7-year-old child, they probably won't understand what you're talking about because it's too abstract. So I appreciate the option of speaking at a high abstract level or at a very concrete mythological or allegorical level, depending on your audience. And both of those methods are useful in our culture. Now, I know that Sam has a graduate degree at Stanford University, which I also have. And what, you don't? What did you, undergraduate? You're muted.
Oh, sorry, it's a side point, but I took a couple years, several years of graduate courses at Stanford, but didn't actually complete the degree, just to put that on the record. I didn't.
All right, so you have a graduate level education, but not a diploma. Okay, fine. But nonetheless, when Sam is talking to somebody like me or his peers, he's going to communicate at the level comparable to a graduate level at a school like Stanford. Now, if I'm talking to somebody who doesn't have that level of education, I'm going to have to find the level at which I can connect with them and they can follow what I'm saying. And sometimes if you're full of abstract ideas, it's really hard to find the more concrete level that works. You either go down not far enough or too low. And that is a problem. You know, how do you get across abstract ideas to people who don't have the facility to reason at very high abstract levels? So I appreciate, for example, when Stacy uses a very childlike example, the boy who cried wolf. And I understand that fine. And I'm not offended, you know, that she's bringing up a story that you would tell to a 7-year-old, even though I'm 74. So it's fine with me. I don't object to that. So that's one thing. All right. So now let's go back to the two triggers that I took exception to.
Wait, can I ask, what was the connection between that story and what actually happened last Saturday? What was the connection?
Because Stacey used that on Thursday. You weren't present on Thursday, but I wanted you to watch that passage on Thursday. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, Sam. Okay. And in particular, what happened on Thursday was in many ways a reprise of the same drama from last Saturday, except that on Thursday, it was a very similar drama, except I wasn't there during the passage where the drama occurred. Other people reprise essentially the same structural drama, including elevating their voice to a high level near the top of the audio level that you would consider acceptable. And I didn't.
Somebody blew up on Thursday?
I wouldn't use the word blow up any more on Thursday than I would have used it on
Stacy's
Saturday.
There was a lot of raised voices, let's say
Right.
that.
Yeah.
The energy was intense.
I can talk about it because we're here, not in there. I can't say anybody's name unless I talk about them positively. I don't know if it's positive or not, but Doug, he did that thing that really annoys me, where he berates me. He assumes a whole bunch of stuff about me, sort of passive aggressively, and then he doesn't expect me to answer. And then when I challenge him on it, he said he didn't want an answer. So it was just like, and he said that I made him so angry. He says, look at my face. And he was pointing at his face and he was yelling. And I was getting worried for him. And anyway, it was quite disturbing. Yes, Sam, it really was.
Okay,
and,
thanks for that recap. And thanks for bringing that up, Barry, because without that, I didn't know the connection between Stacy's story and last Saturday. So
and actually, it was in relation to me bringing up what's going to happen here and how I was very interested in seeing this topic being focused on in a way that might be different the way Sam can do it. As you know, there's different kinds of conflict resolution for different kinds of conflict. And Doug has spent a lot of time trying to solve these types of things. I'm not satisfied with the space that he holds doing it. Not saying he can't do it. I have my difficulties thinking that it can really be solved here. But haven't seen Sam actually attempt it. And I'm really excited to see what might come out of this.
So I was letting Barry give his recap and I was just clarifying one point. So Barry, I don't think you're done yet. So
No, I
Yeah.
was just getting
Yeah.
started on.
Right.
Keep going, Barry.
I still don't see how it has any relevance to
wait,
today.
Colin,
though.
wait. Everybody had their
Yeah.
say. Let's have Barry's say here.
Let's hear some more.
Okay, so the triggering, first of all, the triggering reaction, my reaction to being triggered was to raise my voice to what I would characterize as level 14 on a scale of 1 to 10 audio level. I spoke at a level 14 on a scale of 1 to 10, twice on last Saturday. And previously on 2 other occasions, back in January, I think they were both in January, I also raised my voice to a level of 14 on a scale of 1 to 10. So that's why I said it was 4 times, because it was twice last Saturday. Now on Thursday, 3 people raised their voice, not to level 14, maybe somewhere between 9, 10, 11, roughly. And it's, this is kind of subjective, but as Stacy confirmed, there were raised voices. I have never heard, in my experience, Doug raise his voice to the level that I heard on Thursday. I have never heard Heiner raise his voice to the level I heard on Thursday. And the third person who raised their voice, I have heard them raise their voice to a higher level than appeared on Thursday. And that's one of the
Without
reasons.
naming names.
No,
but
do you want me to
Colin
name
is
it?
here.
You want me to name names?
Was it all directed at Colin or was that elsewhere? It was all directed at Colin.
Two of the people who raised their voice directed at Colin. And the third person who raised their voice was the other direction. Colin raised his voice at Doug.
I don't think I raised my voice too much
Wait,
with Doug.
we're hearing Barry's take now, please.
Now, that's why, Sam, I gave you the specific timestamps of that Thursday recording. And I have to thank Alex for recording it because, as you most of you know, Doug has been very lax in uploading the videos from Thursday and Sunday. But Alex had recorded it, and maybe other people did too. And he was kind enough to give me a copy of the last 92 minutes. And I wasn't there during the last hour. I was there during the first half hour, but I had to leave at the top of the first hour to go to another session. And all this stuff that I'm talking about is in the recording of the second hour, but I wasn't even present. And Doug was very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Agitated.
No, that's not the word I'm looking for. Stern. He was very stern about a rule that he has that Sam doesn't go along with. Sam thinks it's okay to talk about people who aren't there under some circumstances, and Doug thinks it's not okay to talk about people who aren't there under any circumstances, or they're pretty far apart in any way on that point. I think that's the biggest difference between Sam and Doug is what are you allowed to say about somebody who's not there? And
That was the least of it.
And Doug is very stern and very strict about that. And he let Colin know under no uncertain circumstances what he meant by that. And he said it very deliberately, very concisely, and in an elevated rate, tone of voice that I have never heard him speak in the 8 months that I have been on these Zoom calls. And like I say, I also heard Heiner elevate his voice to a higher level. So this business of raising your voice to make sure that a message is heard and understood and recorded, and I use the term all the way down to the amygdala to be inscribed on the hippocampus. That is to say, it'll be remembered for more than 10 minutes. That was the reason. I'll tell you a story. This is important. When I grew up, and I have a brother who's a year older, occasionally our father would raise his voice at us. Now, when my father raised his voice, it was not because he was angry because of an injustice. He would raise his voice if he observed me or my brother doing something that was unwise, foolish, potentially dangerous, harmful. And he raised his voice to wake us up and say, it's like, look out, heads up, pay attention, Abunai. Now, you wouldn't say to somebody, Abunai, Abunai, meaning look out, you're about to do something dangerous. You raise your voice when you say, Abunai, look out, heads up, because you want to get their attention because they're about to do something that's unwise or foolish or dangerous. And it's because you care not only about them, but about the whole Megillah, because something bad is about to happen if this continues. And that's why I raise my voice the way my father would raise his voice at us if we were doing something that was ill-conceived, ill-considered, not thought through. It's not out of anger.
So it's not about the act of raising your voice, it's about the validity of the argument. Over.
Barry.
Sam, you have your hand up. You wanted to interject before I continue?
Yes.
ahead.
I accept what you're saying now, but in the moment, it certainly did not feel or look or sound like that at all. It sounded and looked and felt like anger. It was not a signal that was, hey, something dangerous about to happen. I didn't see any danger to anyone imminent. There wasn't that safety that was part of that message.
Can you briefly say, Barry, what that danger was?
Yeah, before I do that, I want to go back to what Stacy had left dangling. And that was at that very time, Stacy sent a message to me in Facebook Messenger. And maybe I should actually read it so that I don't misquote it. And I think I actually sent a screenshot of this to Sam. I'm pretty sure I did. Let me just find it here.
I think it was Stacy's request of you saying, hey, was this a dramatization or not? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Yeah. So
I did see that.
here it is. So I'm going to read this verbatim. Stacy writes, and this is at 2:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So it's 3:30.
When it was happening.
Yeah, but this is like, it starts at 11, so 2:40, how is that, 3.5 hours into the thing? Are you really as upset as you are acting, or are you acting out something, question mark? And then I reply back, essentially in real time, like a minute later, 3 minutes later, I have to raise the intensity to 14 on a scale of 1 to 10 to push a message through an utterly opaque filter. And Stacy responds, so you were dramatizing. And I write back, yes, period. And then I write back, this is now, that's in real time. Now, later in that afternoon, after we're all off the connection, I continue, as near as I can tell, Colin cannot hear or retain anything unless the volume amplitude is at a level 14 on a scale of 1 to 10. And then a couple hours later, I append, but I discovered that he doesn't like to be yelled at. So if I yell at him, maybe that will cause him to abhor me and thus leave me alone. I know that he abhors being yelled at. If I can get him to abhor me for the practice of yelling at him, maybe he'll leave me alone. Go ahead, Sam.
Barry, I know you're not done yet, but Kayla's had her hand up for several minutes now. Could we hear from Kayla?
Hello.
Okay.
I'm sorry I'm late. And I also am sorry that if what I'm about to say has already been said. And I'm assuming that you guys are talking about what Colin calls the after show last Saturday, when Colin and Barry had a few words, correct?
Yes.
It's all of
Okay.
last Saturday, yeah.
Yeah. So what I saw there was frustration. And, you know, I kind of understood where that's coming from. And I'll give you an example. My youngest this past week was on this red cube that we have, and he likes to tilt it and stuff like that. And, you know, it's a little dangerous if you tilt it all the time because you're going to fall. And I don't know how many times I've told him, please don't do that. Don't do that. You may hurt yourself. Don't do that because, you know, you're going to ruin the furniture. Don't do that because somebody might get hurt. Just don't do that, please. You know, I don't know how many times I've said it. So the other day he was doing the same thing. And the dog was like sniffing underneath it, and he was about to slam the cube down. And I screamed, ah! You know, just like, and it scared him. Now, I don't like to scream. I don't like to raise my voice, but sometimes it's just necessary. And I realized that when he was about to cry and he was just staring at me incredulously, you know, it wouldn't have made any sense for me to explain to him, like, I've told you that a million times. So I finally just like calmed down and I told him, I don't like yelling, number one. And number two, I've told you this many times, and I'm yelling at you because I'm scared. I'm scared that you're going to hurt the dog. And if you hurt the dog, you're going to feel worse, so please listen to me. And I kind of see that often. Everybody trying to explain, in a nice, calm manner, fashion, to whomever. And if they don't get it, it can be a little frustrating, especially if they're doing it over and over again. So, when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, he's frustrated. Is it good to be triggered by Colin Barry? Probably not. but I get it. I understand. So I'm glad we're having this healthy conversation, and that's all I want to say. Over.
So I have my hand up also. I forgot what I originally had it up for, but I just wanted to finish by saying, I understand that scenario, Kayla, but in last week, and I'll just repeat this, I didn't see a safety issue. I didn't see that anyone else or Colin or Barry himself was jeopardized by imminent danger. So to me, that argument does not apply unless somebody illuminates me further and say, where was the danger? That's my reaction to it. And I
That's the
think
question.
Stacey had her hand up and now Colin has his hand up.
So my comment will address that, and Barry, if I'm wrong, please say so. But Colin put in the text, why does Barry even care? He doesn't care about me, something like that. I'm paraphrasing. I think it's close enough though. And I think that Barry actually does care about something bigger than Colin, which is this whole system. And that's where he's focused on. And I'm not saying that, some of Barry's humanness doesn't come through, because it does. But to answer Colin's question of why Barry's so interested, it's not for some of the reasons that you sometimes put out, which aren't very complimentary. I really do believe he really wants to help find a solution for these kind of occurrences, even when it's not Colin or Barry that's involved.
Okay.
As opposed to me.
Wait, somebody else had their hand up after Stacy. What was it? Barry?
Barry.
Right? Barry.
Yeah, I wanted to get back to the question that Sam had asked that I hadn't had a chance yet to respond to. And that is, what exactly is the danger? Sam said he didn't see a danger, and he wants to know what was the danger that I am addressing. And partly, if you had watched the Thursday clip, you would probably got another person's version of it, which is to say Doug's version of it. But I'll give you mine. The first time I raised my voice, it was over the issue where Glenn and Colin were having a conversation where they were arguing over the existence of something that had one definition but two different words. And so they each were using a different definition about what they're arguing over. And my point, and this is because something of Sam had asked earlier, because Sam, like 10 or 20 minutes earlier, had raised this God Yahweh question, and I was waiting for a chance to respond, but I had to wait for other people to stop talking. And this conversation with Glenn and Colin had gone on for at least 10 minutes, for exactly how long?
Months.
And, well, yeah, because it was not just in that particular session.
But you wanted to jump in and solve it,
Excuse me,
right?
I'm
Like,
not done yet.
excuse me, I'm not done yet.
Wait, Barry. was
Don't do that
necessary?
anymore.
Was that necessary, Barry?
Please go on, Barry.
It was, and let me explain why.
Wait. This is
I
exactly
don't want to
what
be in a
happened
group
last
where
week.
that's
Barry,
a
go on.
tactic.
Please.
Can't we just let Barry go on, please?
No, because the same thing that happened last Saturday is happening now. And we're
Yes.
trying to
For the
understand
same
that.
reason. For the same
So
reason.
how about this? Barry, please don't do that again. Go on with what you were
Then
saying.
please let me finish without interrupting.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Colin,
Let him
please do not
finish.
interrupt Barry, okay? Please.
There is a word that I have not heard used anywhere except in GCC. And I don't know who introduced this word, but I know who uses it a lot. And actually it's two words which are antonyms. One word is straw man, and the other word is steel man. And I've hardly ever heard anybody even use the word straw man, which is a well-known word. And I've never heard anybody use the word steel man except in GCC. And straw man means where you take the other person's perspective and you distort it into something that's bogus and then criticize that. And so I observed this phenomenon of somebody promoting the concept of steel man, which is to give a fair presentation of the other guy's position, even though you don't agree with it, but at least give an objectively fair presentation of it so that you can both be discussing the merits of something that you both understand. Whereas straw man is presenting a distorted version of the other guy's position and then arguing against that distortion. And that's a waste of time. It's pointless. And so the first time I raised my voice was an episode involving the application of a straw man in lieu of what should have been present, which is a steel man. Because you want to have a real conversation, you have to agree on the thing that you're disagreeing over the merits of. So if you want to say, does something exist or not exist, you have to have, I don't care if you call this a pencil or a piece of wood, you have to say, what is the definition of this thing I'm holding up? And then does it exist or not? I don't care what you call it, as long as you're agreeing on the description of what it is. So if you take a word and you give it a bogus definition and argue against the bogus definition, that's a straw man. And that's pointless. That goes around in circles. The second time it came up is very similar, except it's not about the existence of an object like that. It's the existence of thoughts and beliefs and feelings inside the other person's head. And what really riles me up, and this has got nothing to do with Colin, this has to do with long-standing experience, is where somebody asserts a model of some other person, which is a bogus, distorted model, and then criticizes that model. Now, that's also an example of straw manning, except that imagine, let's say that you're an engineer or a scientist, and your whole career is about constructing reliable models that make reliable predictions, that have explanatory and predictive power and diagnostic power. And your whole career depends on constructing reliable testable models. Now, I did that for elements of the telephone network, which is a man-made system, complicated, but not that complicated compared to an 80 billion neuron human brain and all of the contents that goes into the character of a person. So when somebody who barely knows me or anybody else constructs a mental model of a third person, which is bogus, adopts it, assumes that the mental model is correct and attacks it, that really riles me up. And that was the second reason I raised my voice.
Are you talking about that day or are you talking about today, like 5 minutes ago?
No, I'm talking about last Saturday.
I'm curious also about 5 minutes ago.
Okay, so now that about an interruption. Now this goes back to Thursday, which I understand you did not watch the clip I wanted you to watch on Thursday. But in that clip, Doug raised the issue of interruption. And he said, among other things, a number of things are not okay. And one of the things he says is not okay is interruption. And he was very clear and very stern about that. And he raised his voice to, I'll give him, say, maybe a level 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. Stacy can confirm or deny that, or Doug can. But interruption was one of the things that Doug asserted is simply not okay, period. And Doug said, I will throw you out if you continue to do that. And you don't take my word for it, go watch the video. I gave you the timestamp, Sam. Okay, so making false characterizations about other people and acting, Glenn picked this up right away. He says assumptions which are not verified. And that happened on Thursday as well. And so Doug outlined 2 or 3 things that he said are not okay and was very, very stern about these are not acceptable. And if they persist, I'll kick you out. Now he went up to level, close to level 10. I went to level 14. Why? Because if it had worked on Thursday, it would not have happened just now. The whole point is what works. Now, I don't necessarily like to do pragmatic things that work in the short term, but maybe have long-term negative consequences. But Kayla raised her voice at her son. Now, maybe that will traumatize him and he'll never recover from it, 30 years from now. But the point is that that's a risk you take because she doesn't want the thing to fall on the dog. Okay. So I did an experiment. I said, nothing seems to be working. This has been going on for at least 8 months that I've observed and maybe 3.5 years that Sam's observed. I said, let me try an experiment. Let me try raising my voice. Now, what level? I don't know. I'll try 14. The first time I used it, it worked beautifully. And Alex is here. He can recall it was on January 30th in the after show of a Saturday session on January 30th. And I raised my voice to level 14. It was the very first time. And there were 3 people present in the after show, myself, Alex, and Colin. And I had asked Alex to read something I had written the couple of days earlier and tell me whether he understood what I wrote. And while Alex was pulling it up to read it, Colin started reading it to him, except that 1.5 sentences into it, Colin departed from reading what I wrote and started opinionating and editorializing. And I yelled at him at a level 14, and he disconnected. And then Alex and I had a nice conversation for the remaining amount of time. It was fabulous. No interruptions and no distortions. And that was the first time I tried it. It worked. I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe I'll need to use that in the future. And I used it a total of 4 times. 2 of them were last Saturday. One of them was just now. So that's the 5th time just now. I'd say.
So I see
remember-
3 hands up.
Sorry.
I think I was Kayla. Alex, I don't know if you were before Kayla or after Kayla. So can we go Kayla, Alex, me, or Alex, Kayla, me, whichever you guys decide. And then Josh. Okay, so let's line them up. Okay, so let's Kayla, Alex, me, Josh. Josh.
I was just commenting on what you said, Sam, earlier about no imminent danger. I started to think about that and remember certain people totally yelled at me for no reason. And I think like looking back, the danger was the fear of repetition and something happening again. I'm not saying that it's a great excuse, but at the same time, when people yell, I think out of fear or that passion or something that's just waiting to burst out. I don't see, like you said, that huge imminent danger, but it's more of like a personal, a psychological thing, if that makes any sense. Anyways, I just want to say that. Over.
Thank you. Alex.
I've got a solution sort of thing. It's a guideline suggestion, and that
Can we
is
do
that
that
if
when we
you-
move into solution?
well, if you have your mic on, then you've got to wait for the moderator to before you speak. Then nobody can interrupt if you do that. Otherwise, keep your mic muted. Over.
Okay, so let's revisit that when we move into actual proposals for what to do. Is that okay? All right. I'm going to go next, and I'm going to address probably 3 separate points that I've heard come up. Okay, and that is Barry. One question for you. In your decades of experience at AT&T or Bell Labs or whatever it was, did you feel a need to raise your voice to level 14?
Never.
Okay, that's point number 1. Point number 2, you may not like hearing this, but in my opinion, you also have a false model of Colin. Just as
I have
you
the null
claim he
model
has-
of him. I have the null model of
No,
him.
you do not have a
No,
null
you have
model
a
of
model.
him. You do have a model of Colin. You just said minutes ago that the only thing he hears is when you raise your elevated tone of voice. You did say that in this session, and it's been recorded. And that is it's a component of your mental model of Colin. And I believe it's inaccurate. Colin has shown that he's heard much more than just the stuff that's yelled at him, okay? So you yourself also have a false model, or at least partially false model of Colin. So I just want to point that out also, okay?
I'll accept that.
Now, my other last point is here about rules. As you know, a week or two ago, I actually exited an unblocking session when I heard that, hey, you don't talk about people who are not here, okay? My actual objection was not to the rule itself. I'm completely okay with the rule. I'm completely okay with rules about not interrupting. I'm okay with any rule about having to wear red shoes to sessions. I don't care about the rule itself, okay? What I care about is how the rule came to be. Now, what I'm trying to do here in GCC is to have a collaborative process, maybe not the best one, but at least one where we don't have a single individual, whether it's me or Kayla or Joshua or Stacy, say, this is the rule, you must accept it. I've heard this term power over in GCC a lot, which is we're not trying to do power over. We do not want to be patriarchal. We don't want to be hierarchical. We don't want to exercise authority. I've heard all of the old industrial frame criticisms. I heard all of that. What I saw, though, was a single person, and I clarified this, by fiat dictate, say, this is what is going to be a rule, which countermands and contradicts all of those other guidelines that I heard for 3 years about not exercising power over, about us coming together and trying to create the culture or whatever else we're trying to create here in GCC. That was the reason I decided this is someplace that I should not be. Let me go away and think about this for a while. And let me see if that's exactly the case. So I actually wrote up that interpretation, sent it in a couple of different channels, and people did see it. I didn't get a lot of engagement on it, however, okay? So it's probably just sitting there and nobody's either picking up on it or contradicting it or even supporting it. I'm just saying that is just my take on what happened. So it was a disappointment to me. It was a disappointment that a culture that has tried not to exercise power over actually showed power over quite strongly and confirmed it. Now, I know I'm speaking about Doug here, but I've gone public already with that text saying this is what I saw. So I'm just reiterating what I've said already in public. So that was the point about the rules. Not that I object to any given rule. I'm more interested in how we together create a culture. Just as I'm saying, Barry, in your professional experience, where you're actually compensated to be competent, okay? Mm-hmm. You did not find it ever necessary to raise your voice to level 14. The other thing it tells me when someone raises their voice to level 14 is, in a sense, they don't have a better option. That in their assessment is the best option at that moment.
Yes.
So that to me is also disappointing, that they cannot come up with a better option than yelling. I'm saying we're all human. I've yelled, okay? No doubt. I'm also saying in those moments where I do yell, I'm basically admitting to the world, I have no better approach to doing this other than yelling. And I think that's our challenge also. I think we can come up with better approaches. And that's what I'm trying to say when I'm saying, let's do this exercise. Last week, I proposed you each come with 1 or 2 practices, and we then try and see whether we can discuss and possibly even adopt those practices. So I'd like for us, after Josh and Barry respond, to move into discussion of what practices we might want to propose, okay? So that is my attempt at transition here, okay? All right, so Josh, you're on next.
I really don't have anything to say after that, Sam. I'm really just looking forward to moving to that. And then I just came to check in and see how everyone's doing and say hello. So let's move towards that. So I'm complete. Thank you.
Barry, you're on.
Yeah, I just want to say that there are better options. I'm not only familiar with better options, I've employed them, I've proposed them, I've written about them, I've published examples as well as the philosophy of better options, and I've mentioned them here. I didn't keep track of the number of times, so I've written them up, I've mentioned them, I've proposed them, and for whatever reason, I don't know the reason, they haven't taken root. But there are better options. The thing is that I don't have the power to impose those options because I'm not the founder. I'm not the leading founder of this group who says, here I am, I would like to call into existence a new community. And here's the social contract that I propose. And those who wish to agree to it, please come in and help me build this community. That didn't happen here. I came in late. I came in only last October. And all I knew was the name of the organization, which suggests what it's about. Turns out not to be what it was really about. And I said,
exception to that.
And does it have a mission? Does it have a vision? Does it have a social contract? Does it have a conflict resolution?
Don't you interrupt, Barry! I mean, sorry.
Does it have a conflict resolution protocol? And what I found is that I could not find a charter. Now, what I could find was Sam's, what is it, 5 pillars or 6 pillars, Sam? Sam had something like 6 pillars, but it wasn't a charter. How many? 5.5?
6.
6. But it hadn't been signed on to. It hadn't been written up as a charter that people signed their names to. I promise to abide by this social contract. I sign on to this vision statement. I sign on to this mission statement. I sign on to these goals. Let us collaborate to reach the goals. I look for that and I say, it hasn't happened yet. 3.5 years and no charter, no social contract, no agreed upon mission or vision statement. What the hell? How can it take 3.5 years? This hasn't happened yet. Because it can't happen. There are organizations that have charters and vision statements and mission statements and social contracts and conflict resolution. And I've been part of them in the past, back in the 90s. So it's not like there isn't a better practice. I simply don't have the power to impose it.
Okay. I do note that Alex and Colin both have their fingers up, but I was hoping to move into the practice and proposals piece of it. However, Alex and Colin, please go after I make this final statement. And I will say this, Barry, I will say, my first question is, did you read the proposal that Tammy and I submitted?
I don't think
That actually
anybody
has
raised
a
it to
lot
my
of
attention.
context. Okay?
Where is it?
It's I'll send it later. I think it might even be at globalchallengescollaboration.info if that domain still is live. But anyway, the discussions that were set up post submission were to see if we could learn to put together people's best ideas and come up with better ideas. It was not about whether or not I knew how to create an organization. I've been around, decades. We all here probably have all created organizations. That is not the point. The point is not whether we know how to do it. Everybody knows how to do it the old way. What we're trying to figure out is when we are autonomous, when I don't pay you, you don't pay me, we can each vote with our feet. How do we get that sense of agency underlying every one of us to emerge community or group or society or whatever you want to call it? There's no definite term because we're looking for exemplars that can be done anywhere. This is not one organization that's going to, take over and save the world. That is not the intent. The intent is to model some behavior and some practices and principles that could be put in place anywhere by anyone. So for someone to come here and assume that there's a global challenges collaboration that is incorporated, that is chartered, that is, boarded, that is executed, that is, audited, that is accounted, is a fallacy. And we've said so every single time this topic comes up. So to insist on that as a criticism of this group, I think is unfounded. It's basically not hearing what the group was here to create. We're here trying to experiment with new methods of emergence of how people get along and coexist with each other, in my view. And I've been very explicit about this every single time this topic came up. So I'm not disappointed because anyone imposed a rule in unblocking. I'm disappointed because the thing we're hoping to see here didn't happen. That was, again, old school. That was my disappointment. Not that anybody didn't have a right to impose a rule. It was that we resorted to old school, which has been the butt of 3.5 years of criticism by Doug specifically. So to criticize without understanding this foundation of the group, without asking, seems rash. And not only that, just seems critical, just seems negative, just seems non-constructive. So I'm disappointed by that. Let me close. Alex, Colin, and then Glenn, and hopefully we move into the proposals.
Okay. I was just triggered about 30 seconds ago, but I didn't interrupt. I waited until the moderator gave me an opportunity to speak. I was triggered because Sam said old school, the word old school. Just because something's old school, it doesn't carry a negative connotations. But if you're trying to move away from something, a bad practice that was done years ago, using the term old school, I find offensive. Because there's a lot of good things that come from old school, like moderators, assertive moderators who take the role seriously. And if there's a mutual agreement among the members coming that we have an agreement to follow some simple guidelines, then that's what we should do. I think that's a good move forward direction that we can cooperate on. It's about collaboration, cooperation, consideration. I could go on and on. But that's basically what it comes down to, is that if the members present have agreed to the conversation, they follow the rules. Otherwise, it's like a zoo. We're in a zoo and you've opened the doors of all the cages and let the animals out. Over.
Okay. I see a note from Colin. Colin, are you ceding a few seconds for me to respond to Alex? Thank you. Alex, I agree with you. My disagreement is not with old school. I have been frequently the one to say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of good learning, and ignoring all of history would be also rash, impetuous, and irresponsible. So I do not say that. I'm only saying I would like for this community, barn raising in particular, but hopefully others within GCC, but that's outside my purview. But for that unblocking to accept a fiat dictate rule imposition without a group discussion of it is what I was disappointed on. Not that, it was a rule from an old governance model. My disappointment is with the way it came to be. The rule came to be. Not about any rule, not about any particular person. It's about what we can try and practice in this set of forums. Hopefully that clarifies a bit for you. I am not in argument with you, Alex. There's much in history that is of value. If we're going to take all of old school, throw it away, we throw away fire. Okay, it's silly. So don't imply that that's what I'm trying to say. Over. Thanks. Okay, so Colin, you and Glenn.
Yeah, I had a feeling you'd want to clear that up, because Alex does bring up good points, but I find that sometimes when points are too general and they don't have enough context, they're not going to go very far. People will agree with cold, but what's cold, right? So anyway, I think the disappointing part is the respect to the idea of coexistence. I don't know how you can pontificate and make mistakes and ask for clarification, i.e. steel manning, because who says you know what's right the first time? You have to ask. So if you have somebody's respect, you can pontificate without them blowing up. But if you don't have their respect, they're just waiting on a trigger. And that's what I feel, tiptoes. Worse than that, I feel that with Doug and Barry, they're not young gentlemen. And I would hate to be responsible in any way of provoking somebody that has a medical emergency on Zoom. I don't want to be on the CNN as that guy, right? Just because I have my own wonderings. So I think if we do have respect here, and it's a global forum of finding better ways to, I guess, have collective intelligence would be one thing I'd be interested in. But it, you know, collective intelligence doesn't mean technology. It might just mean, you know, knowing how to store the fire without losing the fire, which is kind of memory, I think. And what I'm hoping is we have a group memory so that we don't repeat these things, because I reflected on all of this, and, you know, I'm thinking either Barry does care what I think, or as Stacy says, what the topics I'm talking about, or he's and he's got something large at stake that I don't see between my conversation between me and Glenn that's been ongoing that I can't figure out. I have figured out the part where he has no patience, and also this repetition has been met, and I think all of us have lack of patience for this continuing repetition, which I'm hoping memory can help solve. The term sheet is a wonderful thing. It shouldn't be looked at as a negative thing. It should become a tool that we use as a resource. And that doesn't mean put every term under the sun, but the ones that clear up a conversation. And I think it's meant to be edited. Like if I couldn't edit that sheet, I wouldn't put a term in there. Okay. So, and I'm just putting placeholders in there. I'm not being glib. I've got a life too. It's not just this, but I think this is very important to me. And Doug challenged me on that. It didn't give me any opportunity to answer, and then said he didn't care either. So it's not about facts. It's not about, no, he said, I take my question back, Barry. Do you remember? He said that. No, you weren't there, but you saw it. He says, no, I take my question back. And I said, well, you put it on the table. Why am I here? And I find that very, very offensive. Take great offense to that. As Sam took offense to you saying that you didn't know why we're here. I think that's the most respect we can give each other, is to figure that out. First of all, and if that means I assume that you're a caterpillar that molts 5 times a year, then you can tell me I'm wrong. No, I'm not a caterpillar. I'm a man. I'm a Homo sapien. Then we can move from there, get closer and closer to the truth. I don't know what the truth is, right? It's a moving target. There's some things I can rely on, and that's why I like Sam's definition of truth. It's something that we can rely on, and I added to that definition, whether it's in motion or idle, whether it's potential energy or not, something you can rely on. So I can rely on Glenn to hear me out. Stacy, for the most part, Kayla, definitely, Josh, for sure, Ties and Sam, yes. Other people, they don't like to have themselves challenged, and that's what you do. So if the respect isn't there and someone's disrespecting you for whatever reason, they're not going to be accepting your criticism as positive. And I'm wondering what it is that's so important in that blow up, that you've got your identity, or whose identity is attached to what I'm saying, that can't be challenged. And it wasn't Barry being challenged at the time, you know. And in fact, when Barry was the subject of my challenge, come to find out, he wanted to play Socrates with me when I was playing street epistemology with him. And he didn't want me to play street epistemology. I asked, what's your definition of soul? And after a while, quite a long time and a lot of noise in a forum, come to find out, Barry says, well, I'm not making a claim. And I said, then we got nothing really to talk about, because I'm asking you what your claim is and why you believe it. I'm not actually making the claim. And that's the thing that comes down to Glenn as well. So I agree with the foundation of what Glenn says. But when it comes to extrapolating into, so there must be a super intelligence, I say, whoa, where'd you pull that out of? he says, well, if we have all possibilities and everything's possible, then let's just put that in there too. And I go, well, wait now, maybe, I don't know. Like, how much do you think? And Glenn's not arrogant about it. He's not saying, I must believe there's a super intelligent, it's becoming, and here it comes. So, you know, it's not a violent discussion between me and Glenn. And for some reason, Barry missed the flow that me and Glenn have. And whether Glenn enjoys it or not, I hope he tells me, because I don't want to waste my time or his. But I certainly don't need to be sidelined by somebody who thinks he's defending Glenn because my definitions are bad. That is unacceptable in this space as far as I'm concerned. And I used to call that rule 0 violence. But now I call it, wouldn't it be nice if we could filter that out? And I'll mention that in the next part, because that's one thing I have to suggest that we could do. So I don't see what the stake is. Why is it so important? Like, where is the danger? Oh, he might have a bad thought. Like the things that I've been told from Barry are so disrespectful, but I still think that he's of value to this group. It's just his way. I'm used to angry people. I've seen a lot of angry people. I don't know. I'm casting whether Barry's angry or not. Sam got the impression he was angry. I don't know if I'm allowed to that. I don't know if I have enough respect from Barry to even have an opinion on Barry. And that's the thing. How can me and Barry work together if I don't have the respect to be wrong? So it's not about whether I'm right or wrong. It's the respect before you even get to be right or wrong. And I think that comes out of a root called militant atheist, but I'm just speculating.
Okay, so, okay, let me just make a meta comment. I was hoping to move to proposals and practices. It looks like this recap section has taken pretty much all of today. So I would like to propose that next week, unless there's someone else who wants to take the floor, that next week we move into recommended practices that we would like to discuss and possibly adopt. The only request I make is, if we do that next week, let's not rehash the sense-making part of it. This is the sense-making part of it, okay? Can we move next week to actually concrete recommendations, practices, proposals? Is that something we can do? Can we, by general show of countenance, say yes or nay, or yay or nay? Anybody negative? Okay, then let's take the rest of the session to just blow out the sense-making part of it. Go as long as you want, but let's agree that next week we're not going to do sense-making, okay? All right? All right, so I have on deck Glenn, Barry, and Kayla, okay?
Okay. I think this might go a little bit into recommendations because I wanted to talk about that today, but I think it's fine to talk about it next week anyway. But I think I've come to something solid here. Because Colin mentions respect and he mentions fair conversation and steel manning. And Barry gave a very good definition of steel manning and straw manning earlier. I think it's quite clear. And he's been also mentioning the null model. Sam challenging him on the fact that he doesn't seem to have quite the null model of Colin that he would like to have, one could say. And the theme I see here is a person argues for certain values and certain principles of behavior, but then doesn't necessarily do that themselves. And especially doesn't do that themselves when there's a certain kind of hostile dynamic. So as far as I can tell, it's very clear to me that Colin's behavior towards Barry and Barry's behavior towards Colin has been very far away from the ideals they themselves suggest and the things they themselves agree. So there's a dynamic. And I'll say also, same what I've seen the dynamic of Doug and Colin earlier, that, clearly, in my opinion, Doug does not fully manifest his own principles in that particular interaction. So a solution to that would obviously be if each of us could really just look at ourselves and see if we can make some improvements. I think it would be very useful for both Colin and Barry if they tried to really practice steel manning in this mutual relation. Not just accuse the other person of not doing it, but to personally practice this. And this ties into this point was mentioned earlier about accepting each other's definitions. We're having a good conversation where we define our terms. And I think that over a longer period of time, we can get a certain understanding of what we mean by the terms. Then it's very important that we, at the very least, understand the definition that the other person is using and show that we've understood that definition. And that's the foundation for this discussion, right? So that was what I reacted a little bit to what Sam said earlier, that all those other discussions out there, yeah, they are associated, of course, I'll grant that, but still, if we have to worry about all the millions of other definitions, it's going to be very complicated. But if we can kind of have them in the back of our minds, yes, and we will. So I'll go on that, but I think it's very important that if somebody has suggested a definition, that at least that is the point of departure in this conversation. So that I try to base what I say on your definition that you have presented here and vice versa. And that can lead to this sync and harmonization that Heiner asked for earlier. And there's another point here too, which is GCC as a whole. Very, very interesting. What Mary said, there hasn't been a poster, so to say. Well, first of all, I've seen a lot of groups who have posters on agreements, and what they do have nothing at all to do with those agreements. In many cases, they're doing the exact opposite. It's like I'm a member of a group called Sam Harris and the Future of Reason, and the future of reason is never discussed in that group, ever. It's not ever a topic that's discussed. And so like, it's easy to sign on to an agreement and do it in paper. It's more difficult to actually do it and do it sustainably over time, right? And that's the challenge. So what is in the GCC original proposal? That's quite interesting. That was an agreement. And that agreement was to highlight the best ideas of the people in the room. And what has been my personal observation from all these conversations? When we have done that, it works. And this kind of drama happens when we don't do that. And to highlight the best ideas of the people in the room, that requires a certain respect. It requires the practice of steel manning. It requires re-listening. And in my opinion, it requires questioning. And that was the thing that I wanted to suggest for today, the practice of questioning. We don't do it here, hardly ever, far too little. Instead, we keep repeating the old rants. We going round and round and round. I think this relates totally to what Heiner brought at the beginning and what he mentioned last week. I think it relates to all of this. If we could question and listen to the answers and really try to figure out, have I heard you right that what you say is this? Just keep doing that a little forward and back, and do it with that attitude that looks for value and looks to highlight the best ideas in the room and wants to interpret your ideas in their best light, and also interpret them in view of what those ideas could evolve into. It's not that those ideas are perfect now. The ideas are a work in progress. So if we can focus on the potential, on the value, on the meaning of the ideas, then the idea can develop. And there needs to be a certain respect. There needs to be a certain sort of just friendliness, right? And there needs to be some real interest in listening and understanding. And if we have that interest is a natural companion to the project of highlighting the best ideas in the room. If we want to have a system that's based on highlighting the best that each person in the network has to offer, then that mindset is the obvious mindset, the appreciative mindset, the value-seeking mindset, the leaning in generous mindset. And when we have practiced this mindset, and we have practiced it periodically, in my opinion, it works. And these kind of dramas, they just don't happen. That I'm complete.
Thanks, Glenn. I think we have on deck Barry, Kayla, Sam, and Stacy.
Yeah,
It's probably going to take us up to the top of the hour, so just warning you guys.
I'll try to be concise. So Glenn mentioned asking really good questions, and I'm a big fan of asking really good questions. And the question that that Doug asked, which I thought was a really good question last Thursday, is, why are you here? I think it's a fabulous question, and it's a question that requires some thought to reveal, why am I here? Or why is this person here? And the reason I think that's a very good question is because about a week before that Thursday, I'm not sure which episode, in summarizing one of the sessions, Doug introduced a term which everybody knows, but I hadn't heard it mentioned. He introduced the term hidden agendas. And hidden agenda is a possible reason that somebody is present because they have an agenda that they haven't announced, but they're pursuing it. And so one of the answers to why are you here is because, oh, I have this agenda that I haven't mentioned, but maybe you can guess it. Okay. And I thought about this question of hidden agendas. I thought that was a very intriguing and provocative suggestion. Are there hidden agendas? And in thinking about hidden agendas, two things came to mind because I like to think on axes that have extremes. On one extreme, there is a non-hidden agenda, which can be called a hobby horse. A hobby horse is something that somebody keeps bringing up, talking about all the time. That's their personal public hobby horse agenda, and they keep promoting it. And maybe other people care about it. Maybe they don't care about it. Maybe they heard it and they, they're sick of hearing about it. So that's one end. The other end, or in between the hidden agenda and the hobby horse, is something that's very interesting. And I've mentioned this, and Sam and Doug both know this term, racket. Racket is a word that's introduced in the forum, among other places. And a racket is something that's not exactly a hidden agenda and not exactly a hobby horse, but it's a practice that has a value to the person using it and a disvalue to everyone else. And rackets are, sometimes the person doesn't even know they have a racket. Other times they can figure out, oh yeah, I have this racket. I never really thought about it that way. But a racket is something that somebody does habitually that causes them to gain and everybody else to lose. That's the feature of a racket. It's asymmetrical in that the person with the racket always gains and everybody else always loses. And in thinking about hidden agendas and hobby horses and rackets, I formed a non-null theory, a hypothesis, that I wanted to float, not because I thought it was true, but I thought it was worth examining to see if it had any merit. And I still haven't done that because the opportunity hasn't yet arisen or roused, whatever. So in the thinking about hidden agendas, hobby horses and rackets, and we've already mentioned mischaracterization, which can be part of a racket. Mischaracterization can be an intentional practice as part of a racket. And on Thursday, Doug also brought up one more term, which I think fits into this milieu, and that was gaslighting. So gaslighting is a practice which may or may not be part of a racket, but it's an observable practice. And then I introduced a synonym. Doug talked about combative utterances, adversarial exchanges. And I proposed an invented word, which a lot of people don't like, adversation, as opposed to conversation, where you talk with somebody. Adversation is where you talk against somebody in an argumentative or adversarial mode. And I love conversation to talk with, and I abhor adversation to talk against. And there's talking with, talking to, and talking at. And these are three ways of communicating, which are subjectively very different. Talking with, talking to, talking at, and adversation is sort of the extreme talking against. And I don't believe that's what GCC wants. I don't believe that we want adversarial utterances. I think we want conversation talking with. And I would like to see us process these memes, hidden agendas, hobby horses, rackets, mischaracterizations, gaslighting, and adversation, and come up with a mutual agreement about how to have conversations that don't have any of these undesirable features.
Let's see, let me go back to my list. Who was following Barry? Was it? Oh, it's Kayla, then me, then Stacy. Wow, okay. Kayla, you're on.
Glenn, I liked what you said about questioning, and Barry, I really liked what you said about processing too. And I'll tell another story. So I had a friend post something on Facebook saying, have you ever been insulted by somebody and didn't say anything because they're your friend and you respected them? And then in turn, you insulted them, but then they said something and then you want to go back and like bring up the past, right? And, she finalized with adulting is very hard. So I answered her and I said, well, actually, yeah, I've had a friend accuse me of having an affair with her ex-husband, and I wish I can go back and tell her she's psycho. And at the same time, I have insulted people too. And I've appreciated when that very good friend hasn't really said anything, because I've had time to reflect back and think on my own that, wow, I acted like an asshole, and go back and apologize to that person. So I really respected their very peaceful approach to it, because I learned more. So that being said, I like the idea of asking questions, because again, Glenn, when you ask yourself like, should I say something right now? Or is it going to be like a bickering back and forth? Wait, last week you said this and that. Or, should I just kind of chill and retrospect a little, and again, it just goes to the whole process of it all, and I'd like to see that more. I'd like to see a little bit more taking time, stepping back and going, instead of like, oh, I got to say it like right at the moment. I think there's a lot of wisdom in patience, and timing. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Kayla. So we've got me, Stacy, and Josh. My reflection, and this might be my checkout, is that GCC was constituted as an experiment, these conversations. And I reiterated that, 10, 15 minutes ago. So I'm not going to restate it. But what I am going to observe is that if we're trying to do the best we can, then we are exemplars of our principles, our values, our practices, our agreements. You know, we stand, and our behavior and our record reflects who we are, individually or as a group. So if people come in here and see people blowing up at each other, or see people interrupting each other, or seeing people, you know, not really leaning in curiosity, but really just sniping and pecking away and, you know, being cynical and being negative, they're going to say, this group is a bunch of hypocrites. No need to spend any time here. Move on. We all know that going to level 14 is not a common successful business tactic. And Barry confirmed that when he says he never had to do that in his decades at AT&T. I don't think I've ever done that in my professional, well, I got to tell you a story. One time it happened, but it was not actually at a work situation, okay? Now, on the other hand, we all have relationships that probably contradict that, but that's a different story, okay? So what I'm saying is, if we want to be the best we can, because we exemplify our values and our principles, then let's show that in our behavior. Glenn's favorite word. Let's show that in our behavior. And if we think that blowing up is the best approach, ask yourself, really? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Dot, 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 question mark. Question mark. Now, somebody, I forget exactly who said, when there are issues that come up in these conversations, it's not necessarily the place in this group to always address it. And I've been saying that for 3 years. I think it might have been Glenn that said that. I was saying from day 1 or 2 that, hey, if there is an issue, those of us who may observe it can offer to take the person who was offended or the person who's actually being egregious. Let's take them aside. Let's respect them as well as the group. Let's address it offline if necessary. But if it begins to be a component of the culture, then we do need to address it as a group. But usually we can say, hey, was that a misunderstanding? Let's do this offline. Hey, this person didn't really mean that. What they really meant was this. And oh, by the way, let's go ahead and have a 3-way. Maybe we can clear it up. That's been attempted multiple times, okay? If we don't do that, then the group itself is derailed. Now, when the group does not have a charter, it doesn't mind being derailed. I have a problem with both those statements. I think this group, in my opinion, has a purpose and a reason for being. And it does get derailed when people easily get triggered and then make their issues the central point or the central focus of these conversations. We can take these offline. We can address them. You know, part of growing up is learning how to do that. Not always getting triggered and then making, you know, everybody else suffer for it. I mean, what was the word you had, Barry, for a racket? It's a racket. If I get to get triggered anytime and everybody else in the group has to suffer my trigger, that's a racket. I would like to remove that from the group space. I would like a set of practices where we know that people can be taken care of, you know, triggers, whether, you know, justified or not, can be addressed. And yet the group still move, quote unquote, forward in whatever way forward means. This, in my opinion, is not a group where we actually discuss and treat people's triggers. In a sense, we may be complementary to unblocking or others, which was in some ways set up to deal with that. Here, we're still trying to lay the foundations of what might be successful, scalable collaboration. Now, as part of it, we are doing our own unblocking. This session is that. And next session will be that as well. But we're doing that, in my opinion, with a clear focus. In my mind, it's clear anyway, okay? So I bring back this practice of, can you remove these episodes or these outbursts from the group discussion and treat them separately? perhaps with a trusted peer, perhaps with 2 trusted peers. Those of you might recognize I'm getting on my hobby horse here. Okay? But there's a reason why it's there. And I don't bring it up every single week. I bring it up when it's pertinent, and I believe it's pertinent now. I believe that personal practices about really holding yourself accountable to doing good, doing well, doing good well. How do you do good well? You can't just congratulate yourself every single day at the end of the day, you know, because you did the best you could in the moment. You have to have other eyes, other senses, other perspectives. And you need to trust them, and they need to trust you and love you before they're going to hit you between the eyes and say, this is the truth. People who don't love you are going to ingratiate themselves with you. So they're going to pat it. They're going to be polite. They're going to just amplify what you say. That's not the best way to learn. So what I've said about Colin, what I've said about Barry, what I've said about myself, is with great love. I want us all to get better. I want this community to represent what it claims to stand for, and not have these, 20-second outbursts where somebody looks at a video and says, ain't for me. Those people don't get it. That is what I'm trying to focus on, okay? We need to figure out, how do we want to conduct ourselves? And if I ever go to volume 14, that will be a real-time admission by me that I couldn't think of anything better to do other than blow up. And you can call me on that. Be one of those loving, trusted peers and call me on that when I do that. Okay? I really do, always, every single week, connect back to why GCC was formed and why that proposal was written and why these conversations exist and why we have barn raising and why we have unblocking and why we have emergence and why we don't have power over and why we don't have, the old school negative practices, why we're trying to emerge new practices. Maybe lost to many, but it's never lost to me. Those are always top of mind and always focused for me. Over. Thanks for listening. Stacy, and then Joshua.
So I agree with everything that you've said and what Glenn said. I just want to go back and highlight something that Glenn said because it ties in to something I had mentioned. I don't think you were there, Sam. I think you had walked away. But Glenn mentioned the importance of real interest. And I think that is huge. And, I had talked about finding out what it is that people really want to know from you. So I would want to know, what do each one of you want to know from me in regards to what I think? Now, there may be some of you that don't want to know anything, and that's fine too. That's where you might have to just be a little patient while the other people get to ask their question. But unfortunately, sometimes we're not interested, and in trying to be nice, we pull ourselves to where we eventually lose our patience. I almost think we'd be better off being honest that, I don't even want to use any examples, but there are certain people that maybe I don't care what their opinion on something is because for my own reasons, it doesn't even matter why. The point is I had mentioned about going around and just seeing, what is it that you would want to ask Kayla and to see what everybody would say. And then Kayla might find one of those questions interesting herself. And that's the one she would choose. And, pretty much doing the same thing with everybody. I want to know where my opinion is wanted and on what subject, because I want it to be mutual. I'm complete.
Thanks, Stacy. Joshua, you've been waiting patiently.
Thanks. Just keep thinking about every conversation I'm in. The best ones is after someone's spoken, take a second to just really take that in so that we can add to the conversation. So instead of what I've been waiting to talk about, I just want to take in what Stacy just said and what everybody said in the room. But even going back 3.5 years doing that, taking it in, the reason that I come here is I believe in what we created from the beginning, which was the idea of an open discussion on Thursday. And in the beginning, it was open to anyone. We didn't have that Zoom bomb problem. So anyone could just pop in randomly. And we usually started out the open discussion with what's living for everyone. Let's do a check-in. So we always started with the check-in. Everyone went around the room, checked in what was living. Then we started an open discussion about anything that what was living for one person was interested in a group think. And we're talking about that openly. There was no boundaries. Someone could come in and be completely crazy and talk about anything. And that was what was living for them. So that was open. And then if something came out of that discussion on a Thursday, oh, wow, let's experiment and try that a little more. Let's go a little deeper into that. We would say, okay, well, let's schedule a Friday to do that. And then the barn raising idea was, since we're having so much fun openly discussing things and experimenting with going deeper into things, let's maybe collaborate on some things, at least, or try to collaborate. And then in that process of the three, open, experiment, collaborate, people got on each other's nerves, which is just normal. I mean, it's just humanity. And so Doug was like, maybe I'll help to, instead of all this we were having a lot of back channel talking about things that happened on those 3 days. And that's what the Sunday came into, is let's unblock. But I think it wasn't really crystal clear about what we're unblocking. We're not unblocking the group, we're unblocking the individual. Meaning what's going on with that individual person that they feel that they got triggered from. And I think that's what happened is when Tammy left the Friday experiment for anyone to take over, it turned into a very deep Gertrude appreciation method of a deep unblocking of the individual, which is pretty awesome. That's just what it turned into. And then the Thursday open discussion, sort of, no one was taking that over as far as, because it's open, anyone could moderate it. There was no moderator for Thursday. We always kept it completely open. No one was moderating anyone. And because of the Zoom call, I think it was because of the Zoom bombing, I would have to say, when people could just come in and show pornography. I wasn't there when we got Zoom bombed. But then you have to have the ability for someone to let people into the room, and someone has to administer that aspect of letting people into the room. And Doug took that up. So I think that our original idea of being a 3-part conversation, keeping things open, experimenting with ideas that are generated, and trying to collaborate is brilliant. And that's why I come here to GCC, because I believe that that 3 thing works. I don't think we need a Sunday unblocking. I think you can take that unblocking personally to your friends, your family, to other people, and come and show up with an appreciation and generative conversational inquiry. I just think we can do great with 3. And if you need a 4th one, we can have that appreciators method that Gertrude is standing up. That can be the 4th one. Is if you have personal things and you want to dive deep into your psychology with a group and group think and group, not spend $200 an hour on a psychiatrist or psychologist, that's a nice, I appreciate the appreciators method. I think it's helped me. I think it's good. But I just want to say that the experiment of being open in a discussion is always going to lead to someone getting on someone's nerves if any topic is open to talk about and no one knows what the topic is. But the idea of leaving with your feet on a Thursday and the thing that you're generatively interested in on a Friday, or let's just say another day, for experimenting on that, you can wait till that thing that you're interested in just come on Fridays. You don't have to come on the open discussion if it just annoys you. That way people are clear about what we're talking about. And what I have heard over the years is, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? Like, what's the purpose? What's the conversation topic? And when I'm in other generative conversation spaces, before anyone comes into a conversation, they ask, hey, what are you guys talking about? So that way they're not detracting from the conversation if there's already a discussed subject. And it's very difficult when I think what Sam is trying to do, and I hope what we're all trying to do here, is not tell people you have to talk about this subject and power over that. This is just the group that we do knitting, and all we do is talk about how to knit and different knitting practices, and it's a knitting group. So if we are allowing for multiple conversation discussions where nobody's powering over anyone, it's gonna get messy. I think people are gonna, no, you're wrong. I do not believe that. Your God is not my God. My God will strike you down, blah, 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 internal things. And if we just accept that we're going to have those conflicts and how we do each other better when those conflicts arise, and I think Glenn was very clear with what he said about how to come in an appreciation when someone else is completely off of your reality and you don't believe at all in what they're saying. Don't tell them they're wrong. Don't straw man them. Don't steel man them. Don't play games. It's not a racket. Let them have their belief. Give them the respect of their belief. And when the timing is right, state what you believe. And maybe it's a discussion. I don't think it's that difficult to do that if you have the respect and allow people to have, and this is the key word, I think is the number one word I'd like to bring to GCC, is dignity. Let someone have the dignity to be in their reality. And with that, I'm complete. And thanks for letting me come to this conversation.
Well, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think there's any hands up at the moment. Okay, I see one. However, let's follow Josh's practice. Let's let this sink in for a second. Okay, I actually like that practice. In fact, we had a practice in our Palo Alto Wednesday night conversations called Serious Conversations ever since February 2011. That was basically one of our practices. Was anytime everyone spoke, we try and let at least 10 seconds go by. However, people found it very difficult. I mean, we would be lucky if we got 3 seconds usually, even though that was an explicitly stated request. Very difficult because people think, oh, if I don't speak, I'm not going to get my chance.
Exactly.
Rather than, yeah, let's really let what this person said really sink in. Let's, take that and really let it percolate to the other thoughts that might be connected to.
So it's my turn now.
I didn't even
Just
get 3 seconds. I didn't even get 0 seconds.
So maybe
Yes,
we
you made
could,
your point, Colin. Yes.
maybe we should throw the mic over and then Colin sits with the mic, who gives it the 10 seconds.
Well, there was a practice in one group that I was in where everybody had to come with an object, and for me, it was my back scratcher. Where's my back scratcher? Yeah, here it is. Okay. So this is my talking stick. Okay. And I would say, okay, now I'm going to hand the talking stick to Barry. Barry now holds up his object, which is a pencil. And then he hands it to Glenn, and Glenn's got his apple.
Right, but I'm saying let Barry take your object, but then let him be the one to hold the 10-second space. This way he knows he's not going to lose his place, but we still get that 10-second. Why are you so confused? It's a question of, instead of you holding the 10 seconds and then the next person has to wait to jump in, pass it to the next person. They hold the 10 seconds because they already know that it's their turn next. So I'm trying to take away that fear of you're going to get skipped over.
I do understand that. I'm not going to respond to that right now, but it's an interesting proposal. Okay.
I think it's the same thing. Let's wait 10 seconds. Everybody just spoke there. That was
okay. So I see Colin, Joshua, and Bear and Glenn.
I'll do what I'll give you an example. So you hand it to me, I hold up the talking stick, and I wait 10 seconds. Okay, a lot's been said, and we're in the after show, which to me is a different space than the regular show. Does anybody else think that way? That the after show is different? No?
You didn't say
See-
goodbye yet.
Okay, so it's 14 minutes after the scheduled time. So we've changed the format of the show collectively together, which was nice. So next week we're going to have part 2, as opposed to doing it all to this week. And I'm actually on camera. Sometimes I don't even know if I'm on camera because I'm not even really looking. So it does come down to the respecting of our ideas, and I think that the behavior of patience follows the idea of respect. If you think something's wasting your time, it's causing danger, especially something that's going to cause your blood pressure or trigger to happen, where you have to attack, then that's what I heard Doug saying. Like, we got to get to the bottom of what that is. That's the trigger we're looking for, what Gartrode did. And I've been through that a couple of times, and it's interesting, but I see it as a specialty of the GCC, not something that we all take part in. It's almost like being in a company and the psychiatrist is over there with Gertrude. Although it's not considered therapy, it's considered mentoring. So, but it's very personal mentoring about, visualizing yourself as something that would make you better. So it really goes into that kind of special treatment. I think unblocking started as a thing for the group. And it has, in my mind, changed its flag from being a group-centered intention to be a personal-centered intention, even with the word I imposed, and not talking about other people, but just keeping focused on yourself. And that's within the purview of the host on Sunday. And a lot of people agree with that method. And I don't even really know a whole lot to talk about it because we don't define it very well, just a loose appreciation. But Doug Shorley spoke vehemently about my participation for him, as he was asking me if I would acknowledge that I am responsible for putting him in that state, that I caused it. And I told him, I said, look, Doug, you're responsible for how you act. That's not my intention. You got me wrong. Like, how can I ask this better? How can I do nonviolent communication better? How can I choose my words better? Because my intention is not to cause anybody pain at all, ever. Why would I? Unless, not here at the GCC. Like, I don't have any battles here with anybody here. Like, what's at stake? There's nothing. There's stuff to gain, right? If we can get into that mode, and that's what people are saying. So if I'm playing with Glenn about something, there's Glenn can tell me when he's had enough. And if people are tired of listening to me and Glenn talk about the infinite, I'm not 100% stoked on it either, but I am interested in Glenn's interest in it and understanding Glenn's interest in it. Same thing with this sacred geometry with Josh. I've asked Josh some things about that, and he's shared with me. So it's not like, but they're not telling me I must believe it. That's the difference between people that I have trouble with. It's usually because they're trying to control me in some way, or make me do something that I haven't consented to yet, that sideblinds me. Now, I do have a lot of opinions. I could probably keep a lot of them to myself, but I think in this group, there is a component of this group of learning that social skills. An engineer, very data oriented type person trying to learn more soft skills when it comes to this kind of thing. And it's not written down, it's not prepared. And so don't expect that it is. But as things progress, I definitely get a clearer and clearer view of what it is to be part in this group and what I would like to align with. And it is the idea, as I've said. I wonder if Glenn could mention it, because I know Glenn listens. See if this rings true to you, Glenn. Coexistence, right? Okay. Ways to disagree better, right? Knowing where our disagreements are so that we can get beyond them instead of arguing about them. possibly resolve them, but not necessarily. You have a right to be different than I do. How about this one? Secular, a secular space where you don't assume that you come with your religion and you take over authority because of you've got the right religion. Like, you come to this space, you can share what you want, but don't come with the arrogance that you're right. That's taking over. And that's why I say the secular space. Now, I don't even know how that fits in. Barry's smiling because I'm sure I got this twisted into a pretzel somehow. But that's what it means to me, to allow everybody's story to come and be respected, but not that. Go ahead. You taking off, Josh?
I'm just saying, yeah, I've got to go. Thank you guys, everyone.
Well, best to you, Josh, and very excited stuff going on in your life right now. So good to see you.
Cheers.
Good to see you.
Yeah. So yeah. Sam says we're not in the after show, so I'll leave the monologue. I think I'm at 6 minutes now, so I don't want to go on. But this has been a show of monologues. So as opposed to ping pong, there's different formats. I'm not opposed to any. Just like Sam says, if they're good rules, we can adopt them. He doesn't have to make the rule. It's just, have we agreed to that rule? And I would like to see a rule come out that we don't yell at people. And if you're not interested in what they're saying, you can say so and just say, you know, this is enough for me. Colin and Glenn are back on again, wasting my time. See you later. And like, that's your choice. Or you could ask what I do oftentimes. I'll ask, is everybody in the room interested in what I'm about to bring up? I've said that many times.
Hold on,
And
you're bringing up rules. You're mentioning rules.
I think we
again,
should. I think we should.
but we're
No,
not-
I think we should.
We've already decided that we don't have any rules. We have guidelines to respect over.
Semantics. So
We'll
what I'm
talk
talking,
more
what I'm talking
that
about
next week as well.
Yeah. What we can do, but what I'm saying is that one has been here from the beginning. And if it wasn't this kind of a special group, I would definitely not want to hang around with people that are loud and aggressive in that kind of a way. But within the confines of this group, it's an experiment. So I can block somebody personally, so I don't hear all the noise and aggravation. But when I come to the group, I can treat them as another group member with respect as anybody else. And if I don't think they're interested in what I'm talking about, I can respect that too. So anyway.
At some point, I think I lost, track of who was next. I think it was, I don't know how Colin you snuck in there, but I think it's Glenn, Kayla, and then Sam. Right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I'll have to be going now very soon. So, but one thing I wanted to finish off with, just now, I think I heard Colin describe why he's here, say a few words about it, and I think these are some of the emergent agreements. So this is like, maybe this is a little bit where I see it a little different from how Sam's described it sometimes. Sometimes he's described it as if it's very difficult for us to come up with agreements about anything. In my opinion, there have been agreements, emergent natural agreements, and the difficulty is to follow them. It's not making the agreements, it's to actually follow them. And I think maybe one of the reasons is that some of these agreements really have to do with applying a very different kind of a mindset. So it is a sort of a big thing we're trying to do in that respect. And so I'm very interested in the specific proposals that different people have made, the recommendations they've made. If they could try to follow those recommendations themselves, we could try to follow our own agreements. We could enact our own agreements. It would make things a lot easier. And then things getting a little messy, let him be a little messy. We can have this opportunistic attitude towards it. It's an opportunity to grow, and we are addressing global challenges. Sam's made this point quite elegantly a few times, and how that doesn't mean you have to bring it up every single time. So Charles is here, not bad. Well, anyway, I also wanted to answer Stacy, because she asked this question last week. What are we interested in hearing from the different people? And that's I like that question, and I pondered it this week. And for me, generally, I'm interested in what you are most interested in, because if the people here share what they are really interested in, really passionate about, then that's probably where they have the most interesting things to say, is probably where they have the right kind of passion, the right kind of, it's probably where they have some, original point of view. So sort of like, instead of follow the money, say follow the passion. So where is the passion? And that is a very different thing from talking about what we want to avoid. And so this is, I think this is a big missing piece in, let's call it, Western culture. I don't even know what to call it, but whatever culture it is we're in, it's an incredible tendency to talk about what we don't like, rather than talking about what we actually want. Like for example, in the space of political or social conversation, it's pretty astonishing how little people talk about what society they actually want and how we could get there. Just a sort of an absence of that discussion, I think, is pretty astonishing. And this is like maybe where groups like this could go deeper into these issues of what is it we actually want. And if that includes certain behaviors, then obviously it would be great if we really try to practice those behaviors. And for Colin and Barry, if you could just ease down a little bit, really try to take this and not take offense, not assume the worst, just cool it down a little bit, maybe take those few seconds, might help a lot. I mean, you both have a lot of really useful suggestions, practices that can be applied. So I think we all have, but we actually have to have some focus on that, right? Have some focus on what we actually want, rather than what we are against. So, yeah. Anyway, it's a lot of things. I think a lot of great things came up today, and if we just try to follow the suggestions that have come up, we come a long way. And a little bit of noise, you have to expect it. So it's not the end of the world, and it's complicated matters. So and I guess next week we will maybe dive deeper into more specific suggestions. Also, love the fact that we now have this written space in Sulit, and I really hope that we can use this, because that's also been a big missing piece in this puzzle. And I think it's still a little chaotic, but if we could really learn to use Sulit and use that in a constructive way, then that would also help all of these issues a great deal. Because I think a lot of the frustration really comes from a feeling that we're not making progress. So maybe the easiest way to avoid it is just to move and really have this feeling that we're we're actually moving forward. I mean, nothing's better for the morale of a team than really feeling that you're moving forward. So and I think the Zulip space, if we use that efficiently, can help us a lot. So yeah, I think that should about cover it. So thank you guys. I'll have
Thanks,
to
Glenn.
go now. But, see you next
Appreciate
week.
the reference, but I think it's Kayla and then me. And then we can welcome Charles if Charles is willing to introduce. So Kayla.
It's too bad Josh left, because I was going to say, I like being here in this group. I look forward to everyone's conversations. Josh is the one who actually introduced me. And I enjoyed today's topic. I just wanted to share that it's been a long time since I've actually been in a group, and the last group I was in was a dance group. And I loved it because they were the best. And one of the things that they implemented was, keep your drama out of it. If they never said don't date. Okay. But they said that if you guys are going to date each other, then just make sure you don't fight. So when we have to practice for competition, we could all just be consistent as a group. And it was nice because it was, 3-4 hours of meditation, just focusing on one thing. And then afterwards, everybody kind of got together. And the beauty of it was, if somebody did have beef with another person, the funny thing is, afterwards, nobody could tell. It's almost as if the problems kind of fell off. So anyways, that's my checkout. I want to say thank you. I look forward to next week, with a disclaimer that I might not be able to be there, but I'll try. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Kayla. Hey, I just had a small note. There is a book that I find quite valuable called Crucial Conversations. And it's by either Carrie or Kyle Patterson. I forget the guy's name. But it was actually used as a text. It was foundational for a year-long course I took called Crucial Conversations. One of the things that came up is that, if we have calm interaction, deviations from that are degrees of violence. We all understand, extreme violence, as in physical damage and possibly death. That's one form of violence, but there's many forms of violence between normal discourse and that particular extreme. Curiously, complete abandonment is also a form of violence, just not respecting and not responding to someone. So these forms of violence can take different gradations. Interrupting is a form of violence. Yelling over someone is a form of violence. And we can all think of other examples, okay? So when we're looking at exemplifying behavior that we think might underpin successful collaborative, scalable collaboration, let's consider whether any of those behaviors exemplify any component of violence. Is that a good basis to build from? Okay, I'm not saying absolutely not, but I'm saying until you show that it is, let's be very, very careful. Okay. All right, so that's going to be my checkout. And Charles, we do schedule this to end approximately 33 minutes ago, but let's say, if Stacy's willing, you can introduce yourself a little bit. What got you here into GCC? What might you be interested in doing here? And then Stacy follows, and then I'll probably depart at that point. Okay.
Well, what got me here is I just saw a thing up on my Facebook page that said that there was a meeting. Go to these various good science sites for climate change, and I thought that probably has some intelligent people on here. I'm currently working on my own solution to global warming, controlling hurricanes to cool the ocean and cool the earth. Being that 5% more cloud cover over the ocean is what's needed to counter all the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, it is one way to go. There is still the ocean acidic problem to deal with, and many other problems, including getting people to listen. And it is geoengineering. So I've had lots of troubles over the past 20 years of trying to get this thing done. And all I've had is failure. But I'm willing to put my 2 cents in and help other people out with different things too. I've been involved with the environment my whole life. My mom was on the book of a thing on smog back in 1968, and we both have written the Clean Air Act, which was a little San Diego law that we got done, and that got changed. So, and we've been involved with the environment our whole lives. So I'm here to help, listen, see what's being done. I don't know. Just here to listen today, really, and see if anybody has anything to question or anything.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Hey, so by the way, we are not focused on climate change. So if that's what led you here, I didn't want you to be disappointed. So there's
that being said, there are many people in this group,
yes,
bigger than the people on this call, that are very interested.
Yes.
But
I
we
just want
just
to
have to
state that for the
focus on-
record,
yeah.
okay?
I was going to say that too.
I just
We
want to
have
state
to-
that for the record.
Sorry.
And then the second thing is, Charles, would you mind giving your full name and what time zone you're in?
I'm Charles Demler. I'm the West Coast, Oregon, Pacific Standard Time. So.
Okay, thanks. And are you a member of the Facebook Global Challenges Collaboration Group, or is it some other group that you saw this reference?
Yes, I am in that group, and I have posted about my project before. I don't know, have other people seen that? Yeah, whatever. But yeah.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay, thanks. Stacy, you're on.
So I was also going to say that at least right now we're focused on conversations and how to have them in the first place. So I just wanted to push back a little bit on one part of what you said, Sam, because we're looking, we asked earlier, how do we move forward into the future? And I think part of what's going to be different is we're going to be using more than just our 5 senses. And to that point, I want to talk about the word interruptions, because while interruptions can be violent, and they usually are, and maybe I'm just defending myself here, but sometimes an interruption is a collaboration of energies. So it's one thing when somebody says, no, and they interrupt like that. That's violent as you speak. But sometimes when people interrupt, they're like validating. And again, I think to just classify something as an interruption based on the word or on the exact act is not enough. We have to feel the energy that the interruption is coming with, as well as how it's received. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's a good clarification. I think there's a very related meme that has just been circulating yesterday, which is there is a practice of following someone's story with a relatable story about oneself, and to be very careful with that practice. It's a related theme to what you just said, because
Yes.
I can say, yeah, Stacy, absolutely. I could have done that before you finished, okay? But what that does is it takes energy away and attention away from you. And now I take the energy and the focus because now I'm relating my relatable story. And so the person originally speaking may not feel completely heard or completely acknowledged, okay? But so I agree with you, but there's this added sensitivity and judgment that I think could play here. Okay?
And that's the point. There are a lot of factors involved. How many people are there? What's the forum? What's the topic even? Sometimes there are people that, oh, you don't know, I had it worse than you, that kind of thing we frown against. But then there's the other thing.
My story's better than yours, and here's why.
But then, then there are other times where somebody's feeling very isolated and they're explaining their point. And or they're starting at a point that you're already on board with them, and if you interrupt in the right way, you allow them to move forward in their story and continue. Because I'm not talking about interruption where you're taking something away. You're just like
encouraging
dropping.
someone,
Like what?
like encouraging someone to continue. I just interrupted you and tried to do that.
I know what you did. My point is, it's a whole equation you have to look at when you're looking at the interruption. And it's not just about one party and one group of actions coming from that one party. It's also how it's received and how it moves forward.
So may I respond to that?
I guess so.
I think some interruptions, if I could actually attempt an interruption that in my mind is supportive and amplifying and resonant and, clarifying, that is also potentially an assumption. Because if you haven't heard the other person completely, there may be a nuance there that was lost because you interrupted. So I think that's another thing. So just saying, yes, there's many more things doesn't detract from the original message that was being delivered, okay? Is be careful. Be careful when you interrupt someone, that you're really not cutting them off so that something they're saying isn't being heard, isn't a nuance that's coming across, and that the attention is now lost because it's been taken from them. Over.
What do you do about a constant spewing of lies, though? When somebody sits there and talks and it's like 2 minutes of, and there's like 20 lies nested in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of those, you may call it a corner case. It may unfortunately not be a corner case in today's society. But yeah, I would probably interrupt and probably then put an end to that. And the assumption there is that these are all lies, okay? And that would have to be examined.
Well, that's the climate issue, there's so many people that lie and they just don't even know that they're lying.
Yeah, in your space, I don't know if it's possible, but doesn't a lot of it come down to who's paying for the lie?
No, a lie is a lie, It doesn't matter who's paying for it. A lie is a lie.
But you can determine a lot by understanding who's paying for that statement, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I interrupted you as a clarification.
No, but it's like going into a computer store and seeing a computer salesman. Half the things he says, he doesn't even know, so they don't even know when they're lying.
They're going off a playbook. Okay, so I think I see Stacy and Alex's hands up as well. At this point, I would like to just say that I got to go eat and pee. Okay, so I'll probably leave you guys to your own devices. Okay, so that's my checkout. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go in a minute and shower too and start my day. Charles, it was nice meeting you. Thank you for stopping here. Sorry, Alex.
I'm just saying about the lies issue. It's the lies come from people who have an agenda, a profit motive or an alternative motive due to vested interests in fossil fuel companies and forestry and ammunition and munitions, Lockheed Martin and companies like that. But the fact is, I've seen scientific charts of the global temperature over the last couple of decades, and they all come from trusted sources and they all point in the same direction, and they're all getting increasingly alarming because of the rise. They correspond with the line going down, which represents the extent of the ice melt each summer in the Arctic and in the Antarctic. Over.
Barry Patoum put in questions in the chat. Is a falsehood a lie or a misconception? And is there a hidden agenda behind a falsehood? because the answers are different. And it does make a difference of how to deal with those.
You know,
It's huge.
misconceptions, I think, are much more important than people appreciate. And if you're an educator and you work with students at all levels, from public school all up to graduate school, you come across misconceptions that are not intentional lies, or simply incompletely understood or misunderstood concepts, which they perfectly fervently believe, but don't realize it's a misconception. And in science, identifying and overthrowing misconceptions is a really huge challenge. There are misconceptions in Western civilization that have persisted for thousands of years. And I have kind of a hobby horse about identifying these long persistent misconceptions. People call them old wives' tales, or there are different terms for these things, but the myths and things that people believe, honestly believe, which are simply incorrect. And it's really, really hard to expose these, and sometimes dangerous to expose them. There are people, like Galileo, for example, he exposed a misconception about, the celestial mechanics. And, he got into big trouble with Pope Urban, over exposing a misconception. So there are famous examples of it and lesser examples, but I mean, an example that I think is kind of instructive is not very well known. As we all know, the atmosphere has oxygen in it. Oxygen is what we breathe in for metabolism, to burn the fuel that we eat to provide our energy. And oxygen was only discovered as a chemical element not that long ago. Antoine Lavoisier and Joseph Priestley both get credit for discovering the element of oxygen. And Lavoisier figured out how oxygen works, how oxygen combines with the fuel and produces a reaction called oxidation, which releases heat. And Joseph Priestley didn't buy Lavoisier's hypothesis. There was a pre-existing theory, which has been long since debunked, called the phlogiston theory. And phlogiston was this imaginary substance that was already in the fuel that created the fire. Turns out that phlogiston, if you try to measure it, has a negative mass. And the negative mass exactly equals the positive mass of oxygen. So phlogiston turns out to be the absence of oxygen. But Joseph Priestley, even though he gets credit for discovering oxygen, didn't believe in the oxidation theory. He believed in the phlogiston theory to his dying day. That's a misconception. It was a big one to overthrow. And there's lots of examples, in science and in other cultural models of misconceptions that are persistent, but they're not evil. They're not intentional. They're just misunderstandings that are really, really hard to overthrow. And, people in my profession, we wrestle with what do you do with the misconception? Is it dangerous or is it harmless? There's a book by Kurt Vonnegut, and he has this word FOMA. And FOMA is what's called a harmless untruth. It's an untruth which is clearly falsehood, but it's harmless. It doesn't really matter. But then there are untruths which, if you believe them and act on them, they are problematic. And when you come across a harmful or problematic untruth, what do you do about it? Go ahead.
I think what you need, you have to be able to question people in a way that doesn't feel argumentative or like you're attacking them.
Right.
I have this conversation a lot about how to deal with people coming with different conspiracy theories. And I try to explain to my well-meaning friends that by just holding up your hand and saying that's a conspiracy theory, you're actually fueling whatever it is that's going to keep them from possibly seeing something different. So I think it's upon us to find what could be a particle of truth in what somebody is thinking and build from there. Because not everybody that disagrees with us are idiots. I mean, they form their conclusions a certain way too. And if we don't find a way to at least get to a center point where we can look together. And I know, Charles, this is a little bit different because there's like scientific fact that makes up what you're talking about. But just in general, it's a lot better to set a stage where you're having a really appreciative inquiry with another person to understand how they think. And with that, I'm complete.
Yeah, I'll take my talking stick. Nice to see you, Charles. And you can definitely reply to that. I'll go after you.
You're muted.
Sorry, anyhow, yeah, I'd like to say that, yeah, when it comes to life and death, I mean, there's like 50 quintillion animals that the earth no longer supports right now because of climate change. So yeah, anyhow, people think differently too. When you're talking to somebody, it is now known that Republicans and Democrats generally, when talking about different things, have their activity centers in the brain light up in different areas. Some areas are lighting up in the frontal lobe while talking to other people. The areas on the side of their brain is lighting up. We don't know what's happening with this yet, but people do think differently, and it's weird. Just want to.
It's true, and it's even weirder than that. I use an example to try to increase the spectrum of possibilities of thought. And what, with the example of autism, not autism, savantism, or the savant. The one I use is Daniel Tammet, I think, the boy with the incredible brain. There's a documentary done on him several years ago. And when I saw that, it was sort of like a milestone in changing my thought about, or not changing my thought, but an example of how we really cannot presuppose the limits of the mind as we typically experience it as a group, because these are edge cases, but unless you think they're touched by some kind of a deity, which I don't. In fact, I think it's more of a proof against a deity. But anyway, that's a big, long root in this group, and it's got many edges. And I think how to frame the conversations that we have is a big thing I'm looking into in order to have what I'm calling now a fair conversation, because there's so many different ones. And you can imagine being in a conversation being manipulated. And if there was something that you could do at that moment to make the conversation more fair, that would just take the emotions out of it and say, well, these are the facts. And as I think Barry or Stacy alluded to, you can tell somebody new facts, but that doesn't mean they're going to accept them. Even like flat earthers try to go talk to those people. So there's certain points where you get into an impasse, even though you have the facts. And my latest milestone in thinking paradigm shift a bit, not in knowledge, but in order of importance. I used to think story and fact were together, but after reading Sapiens and thinking about it, and knowing that, people are actually motivated to be able to cooperate in larger groups through myth and story. So it's how they feel about it and how they attach to it that has actually allowed our societies to grow. I don't know if you know the book Sapiens by Yuval Harari, I think his name is.
No,
Charles, if you know that book.
Which book? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Sapiens by I think it's Yuval Harari. What's his name? Noah
Yuval Harari.
No, I've not read that.
Israeli. And he's a thinker.
Yeah, I've not heard anything about him.
Sapiens. Well, it's quite a book, and it's about 11 years old. Yeah, well, he basically, it's about evolution, and it just basically lays out how humans actually, managed to spread across the earth. And, dispels a whole bunch of myths like Barry's talking about. Although a lot of it's certain, then that probably is not as reliable as happened past, X number of tens of thousands of years ago. But they can definitely see traces of things. So where they called it the Stone Age, he says it might actually have been the Wood Age, but the wood didn't survive, as the stone parts of the tool. So anyway, to make a long story short as possible, it comes down to, if you're going to have a conversation, and like Barry, he's interested in dispelling myths or having logic lined up in a way that you can actually think your way through it and come to some kind of a discernment, as opposed to everything just put in a pot and scrambled up like you get it in social media. Like, how do you navigate through the data of a conversation with people, like even here? So to have a fair conversation is kind of what I'm thinking about recently, and what kind of feedback indications you would need to set that up. And I think one of the main things to just say simply about it is that there's several different types of conversations that we could have in this group. And so if we could identify that, oh, this guy's talking about such and such, that would be a good conversation to have. Why don't we have a debate on that? And debate night is set, as opposed to trying to have a debate during the regular weekly conversation. And I think that's kind of what Sam was alluding to earlier, that, all the conversations don't have to happen here. And I think that's been a big friction for this group. Everybody just trying to fit everything into this one space, as opposed to working outside and side channels and coming back here and updating. It's been very, very unfocused, in such a way that focus is like one of the main topics that we've had. How do we focus? How do we have conversations? And you laugh. Barry got nailed on it today again, and he's been here for 6 months or more even. So, so it's definitely a good place if you're looking for a way to get your story straight and hone your message, that kind of stuff. And I would like to see more promotion of things that we've been doing in the art of focusing, where someone like you would come in and we would give you the stage for like an hour and a half or an hour or so. And then afterwards we do question and answer, or see, the idea is the experiment was actually you get to show us how to focus by you focusing the group. So you bring your topic and you focus the group, and afterwards we'll talk about whether your techniques, talking about your topic, help focus the group. And so we all kind of did that. Go ahead, Alex, you got your finger up?
Yes. There's something I wanted to mention about the atmospheric warming, which Charles touched on, and that is that the geoengineering ideas are fraught with danger and uncertainty. But if you go outside the atmosphere and put reflectors in orbit, they won't have any effect on they won't have any risk associated with them as geoengineering has, because they're outside the atmosphere. They're orbiting, they're floating in space. And reflectors made from very thin graphene materials will be lightweight, and you can put a lot of them inside a rocket, especially a big rocket. When you unfold them in space, if they're made on rolls, rolled up onto long poles, you unroll them out in space and they cover like 50 soccer fields from one rocket. And they're reusable rockets, so it won't cost much. It'll probably cost less than feeding the starving people in a third world country for 12 months. That's not much. So there's plenty of billionaires who can afford it. But what's stopping them? What's the agenda that's preventing them from coming forward with solutions like this that are doable? Over.
Yeah,
Totally, go ahead.
Oh,
Alex is all about this stuff. He's talked about this a lot. So you guys are going to hit it off on that for sure.
did you say go ahead? I think. Oh, well, whatever. Yeah, mirrors in the Grange point of space is the best way to do it. That would take like 5 years to set it up. You're talking about putting stuff in the upper atmosphere above the stratosphere. I'd say to block out the sun's rays. That sounds great. I would say materials from the moon, build it there. It might be a great deal. You know, that might work. I know that clouds do reflect the Earth's rays out in space, ones with ice on it. You know, that's my method. It should work. And yes, there's dangers involved. It will change the atmospheric river. It will cause the amount of people that die and live, or the animals. But right now we're at 50 quintillion minus, so that, you know, if a few billion animals die, you know, sorry. I want to save quintillions more animals and maybe bring more life back to the Earth.
I wonder if Barry knows that the gas, the CO2 gas we're emitting from our motor vehicles and factories, does that float close to the ground, or does it float high up in the atmosphere?
Oh, you're talking about the molecular weight of carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
Let's see if I could. Carbon is 12 and oxygen is what, 16? I have to look it up. But it basically, I think it basically mixes pretty much, because you go oxygen, it's only about 2% or 3%. So it's a relatively small percent of the atmosphere. And actually, what's worse than carbon dioxide is methane, because methane is CH4. That's very light. And methane rises much more rapidly because it's a much lower molecular weight. And in terms of what it does in the upper atmosphere, it's much more concerning. The effect of the effect of methane is much more serious than the effect of carbon dioxide in terms of acting as a blanket on the Earth.
Yep.
And the real problem with methane is that it is being released from the permafrost as the Earth warms, especially in the Arctic. The methane that's in the permafrost is being released at an enormous rate. And they don't have enough data to get really reliable models, except that they know that stoichiometrically, that's the technical term in chemistry, that that one molecule of methane is far more concerning than one molecule of carbon dioxide.
Yeah. Well, even though there's not much data, or they haven't got enough data yet, they've got an amount of data that allows them to make a calculated guess, a projection.
Yeah, and they've got the empirical data. They've got the measured trends over, I don't know, a period of a century or so. And, you know, in terms of what's going to be like in 200 or 300 years, you know, 50 years of data may not really be enough to tell you the whole story. It may be worse than it appears to be, maybe not so bad as it appears to be. They don't really know.
They know that they know there's a seesaw effect, a triggering event, right? When the amount of gas in the atmosphere reaches a certain level, it causes an explosion of repetitive cascading effects, that like a domino effect, and that's what happened. That's what happened on Venus. So if you want to know what's going to happen here with this rising CO2 and gas in the atmosphere, just look at Venus. Look what happened on Venus.
Yeah.
It had a greenhouse effect.
The issue is the albedo, which is how reflective is the surface of the Earth. So as the Earth warms, the Arctic ice caps melt and they become darker, and therefore they absorb and retain more sunlight. So you get this accelerating effect that the Earth becomes darker. And so more sunlight is retained by the Earth, and that speeds up this melting and the darkening of the North and South Pole hemispheres. So that's you can see the effect qualitatively, but to compute it quantitatively with some precision, that's a little dicey. Is it going to happen sooner or later? All you know is that it does have a runaway effect.
Well, yeah, when you call an ambulance, you can't calculate whether the victim's going to die immediately or when the ambulance gets there, right? So whether or not you're accurate with your data is not important. It's just get the ambulance there, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Over.
Charles probably has more knowledge about the runaway effects than I do. I know them qualitatively, but I don't have access to the models to study them.
Well, yeah, there's
Get a
600.
word for you.
I call on Charles.
it's so much worse. There's like 600 gigatons of free methane estimated like 50, 60 years ago underneath the ESAS, East Siberian Arctic Shelf. And it's coming up now, and they just discovered methane blowholes out of the East Siberian Arctic Shelf that's underneath the ocean surface, you know, like 40 meters down, that are comparable to the methane blowholes that are on the Yucatan Peninsula. And that means that free methane's coming up, and 600 gigatons of it's down there. And it's dated over 1,000 years old. So that means it's not recently made. It's come from the methane. It was trapped down there. It's coming up now. And it's like they just found out that when it gets a lot warmer, the clouds are losing their ability to create ice at the top, which will turn them all into suckers instead of, you know, reflecting the Earth's rays out in space. And it's going to get real bad. They've estimated 1,500 years of heat. And yes, there is a lot of knowledge on this. They're just ignoring the science, but yeah, it's real bad. And I'm called an alarmist by people, and ignored and laughed at and treated like crap for the past 20 years, because I have a geoengineering techno fix to stop the free methane from coming up. And, you know,
The best practice is don't have any children, because if you predict that your children are not going to survive, don't have any.
I don't know, but
They're going to suffer.
I have some smart ones. Smart children. The word I wanted to share with you is one I recently learned watching a science documentary, and it was a word they devised in around 1995. It was coined by people studying the tobacco industry that were filling the literature with what you would call manipulative science literature, or, you know, flooding the market with more science, using science against itself to confuse the science, was what the tactics of the tobacco industry used. And the name of the practice that came out for studying this phenomenon is called agnotology. Have you heard of that one?
I gave you that word.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I did. I brought it up probably 6 months ago, floated it around.
I don't know. Well, the first time I heard it was with this documentary that I watched. There's a lot of words out there, but yeah, so that is quite a very interesting thing. And the fact that, you know, they coined that in 1995 was, you know, and that is, you know, an anti-pattern to a fair conversation, right? So
It's just, by the way, Charles, in case you don't know what it means, there are people who study the phenomenon of intentionally spreading falsehoods. And the study of that phenomenon is called agnotology. They're not the people who are spreading it. They're studying this phenomenon of people who spread falsehoods intentionally for nefarious purposes. So there's not very many people who are agnotologists, but that's what they study.
yeah, I should quote that documentary. It was really good. I wonder if you must not have seen it, but it goes right into the future as well. And it's, I think it's right up your line of the fight for the truth of stuff. See if I can reference what that video was.
If you go into the P2P, the peer-to-peer Facebook group, and you put a search for agnotology in the peer-to-peer P2P group, you'll find maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the introduction of agnotology as a topic in that group.
So you want to be a software engineer at Google? Go here and write some code. Skip ad. Okay. Yeah, I think this is it.
Oh, Stacy's still, I guess she's listening. I wanted to go back to something that Stacy talked about, but also tied into what Sam said, because but way back when the internet was first becoming available to large numbers of people and people started doing community building on the internet, creating communities out of people who didn't know each other in advance. There was this whole theory or philosophy of community building, which I think is quite kind of interesting. You start out with something called an accidental community. An accidental community, these people are just thrown together happenstantially. They have nothing in common to begin with. It's like a neighborhood. You know, people buy houses in a neighborhood and they discover that they have neighbors, and the neighbors are nobody they knew in advance. So you have an accidental community, and that's pretty common. And then in this theory of community building, the simplest intentional community, the opposite of an accidental community, is an intentional community, one that's created for a purpose. And the first kind of intentional community is called a community of interest. And people are come together because they have something that they're interested in together. And they want to talk about their shared interest. Just talk about it, you know, and trade stories. Like people who are interested in antique cars, or interested in knitting, or interested in a certain kind of science fiction novels or whatever, and they have the shared interest. But they're consumers. And then the next level up is called a community of practice. The community of practice are people who are not only interested in a subject, but they're also actually doing the thing. They're trying to be creative and participate instead of just being in the audience. And so there's a community of practice where people trade their know-how within some item of interest. And then Sam introduces the term community of impact, where people are not only practicing something, but they want it to matter to people beyond just their group. And the last level is what I call a center of excellence. A center of excellence are people who are not only interested in the subject, not only practicing it, but practicing it at an intense level of world-class competence for the purpose of making the world a better place because of their practice. So that's like community of impact, but you know, at a world-class level. And one of the questions that keeps coming up in groups like GCC is, what level is GCC? Is it an accidental community? Is it a community of interest? Is it a community of practice? Is it a center of excellence, world-class center? Is it a community of impact? And people can disagree because we have diverse interests and, you know, separate hobby horses and all. My feeling is that it's closer to an accidental community than an intentional community. But that's my impression, having experienced all levels of community building. And I think that's why Sam earlier said he was disappointed, because I think Sam imagined that it would become something like a community of impact, and it hasn't. It's not even sure it's a community of interest, because it's so, the interests are, there's no single interest. It's so diverse. And people are not all practicing. If people were practicing the same thing, they would collaborate to practice together. And there's not that much collaboration going on either. So that just sort of wraps up this theory of community building. Accidental community, intentional community, of interest, of practice, of impact, center of excellence. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, there are some sprouts happening here from people involved. I've got people interested in my idea of the web pages co-created by members of the impact community that are peer-to-peer, peer-to-talented peer. I put the T in there. The T stands for talented, but in the other forms of P2T, it stands for the planet. People power. People, P2TP, people. I've confused myself, sorry. Power to the people, right? That's a Black community in San Francisco that's spread around the world and grew quite large. And then there's power, what are the other ones? A place for people to collaborate. So it's like if you have a artificial intelligent bot surfing the web looking for connections, and it finds the web pages that have keywords in the metadata, like power to the people or P2TP or P2P, and collaborology, words like that in the keyword section, it makes those significant because it's got algorithms that connect the dots. It's artificial intelligence, it's machine learning. It's connecting the dots for us. It's doing that work behind us in the background. It's doing that sort of work intelligently, automatically. And so all we have to do is use the power of HTML, hypertext markup language. And most of the software that's coming out from the big platforms these days allows you to do that simply, drag and drop, without any knowledge of programming. It'll even make a mobile version of the website you're creating with the drag and drop. So there's the avenue that I suggested, and that's a sprout. You call that a sprout. Collins supported the idea. Joshua supported the idea. Stacey supported the idea. Doug has supported the idea. Doug's even got a website of his own up, although it's not actively connected with a Links Plus page. A Links Plus page is part of the website that you co-creators make. And the Links Plus page is an important aspect of my sprout. Anyway, I'm promoting my own idea, so I better shut up. Over.
One of the interesting experiments that I really had a great deal of hope for, Google created a competing service to Wikipedia, and Google called their competing service KNOL, K-N-O-L, which is short for knowledge. And the difference between Wikipedia and Google KNOL is that on Wikipedia, if you're a subject matter expert, and in particular, if you're making a living at something, then you're disallowed from writing an article about it. You can only write an article or contribute to an article if you don't have an interest, professional interest in the subject or making a living off of it. But on Google KNOL, if you have something that you're making a living at, you can write an article about it, and just like in the glossary, two people can have the same word with different definitions. On Google KNOL, there could be more than one article with the same title and the same subject written by different people, so they could be side by side. And you can collaborate to write the article with other people, or you could have competing articles on the same subject. And I thought that was a fabulous idea because I wanted to write about things that I had done research on. And you can't do that on Wikipedia. I couldn't write about anything I'd done research on because I was earning my living at it. It was illegal. Google KNOL ran for, I think, about 3 years. And I had written one article, which was my own research, and it was very highly ranked. The editors of Google KNOL said this is one of the best articles ever on Google KNOL. And then they decided to shut it down. And I don't really know all the reasons why they decided to stop supporting it. Maybe because people were writing, junk articles for their hobby horses. Who knows? I don't really know why. But it was kind of disappointing. And that was this same issue with Sam. Something that looks really great, has a lot of potential, and then in practice, it falls apart for whatever reason. It doesn't reach its potential.
Hey, can I butt in?
Yeah.
To make a project like this reach its potential, you need that little agreement that has one person, the power of one person adding 2 friends. If that agreement is passed on to those 2 friends and they copy what you did, you get exponential growth.
Yeah.
Over.
Sometimes it happens, but some things do go viral, but the things that go viral don't tend to be the best things. The best things might be so rarefied, so esoteric that they don't draw much of an audience, even though they may ultimately be the winner in 50 years. You have to wait for the others to die off. The others have to run their course. And that's one of the, I mean, a lot of the role models in my life are people who lived long time ago. Their work didn't come to fruition in their own lifetime. They were basically ignored or sidelined. And then, you know, centuries later, people finally figured out they were onto the right thing. So, you know, if you're current, you may not be the survivor. It's an interesting phenomenon. And you have to sort of realize that a good idea might not catch on until after you're dead. It's 20 after 2 Eastern time, which means that we've got only about a half an hour before we go past the 4-hour mark. I'm proposing to basically call it a day unless somebody has something very pressing that hasn't been said yet. Colin has something
Got something to add.
very pressing that
Yeah.
hasn't been said yet.
You can judge it. You can judge it. I think this will meet Barry's standard. It's good we have standards. So we've been speaking on behalf of Sam a little bit, but recently I've come across a video of Sam speaking about his vision and carrying on the vision of Doug Engelbart. So to understand what's going on here, you got to understand Sam has got this core drive, and it's mischaracterized as disfocus. It would be properly characterized. It is extremely hard to do without having a leader telling everybody what to do. So the idea is that how do we work autonomously? So anyway, I'm about to knock some stuff into the chat here, which is a link to that, the interviewer's question, and then Sam's response. But you know, he really kind of goes into that unfinished business of Doug Engelbart and how that has to do more with the social side of stuff than it does just taking an engineering approach and saying, you know, what are the requirements? How do we, you know, build this into a model and fix it? And that whole idea of you just can't take a complete engineering approach or alone, I think is a big part of this. So I'm going to hit that in there. The interviewer says, how would you describe it? Sounds like you're attempting to implement it. How would you describe Doug's vision? That was the question to Sam. And I'm just going to, for the record, going to put the timestamp there. It's around 1:35. It's an 8-minute video. So it's pretty good. It definitely speaks true to Sam's longstanding message. And you know, that he says he hasn't varied that much from his message. This is from 2013. He has tweaked it a bit. One of the milestones is when he questioned whether it could be done without some level of at least 1 or 2 levels of hierarchy. And he hasn't caved yet. So he's had another bout of faith, but the idea is that we don't use hierarchy. We use people who can come up with good ideas, and a group like ours, I think, would be one that would take interest in other people's ideas and help them. So it seems like, you know, you will find people around here that'll help you. Probably found a good place to be, but don't expect it to make sense or have a single view, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I put that in the chat. Hopefully that'll matter. And you know, I've always been proposing if people could do like little videos and stuff, and I could see Barry giving a TED talk. Like, he's got tons of stuff, right? He knows so many people. So, you know, like if people could prepare themselves and get the audience and alignment right, a lot of things could happen instead of bickering over, you know, is there a God? Is there not a God? It's like, if you're going to bring a God in here, define what you mean by God, and don't whine about it, or else don't bring it in here. That's the way I look at it. But I'm not a diplomat. And I think that's one thing that really needs to be said here, that some people in this group really are trying to smooth over and, you know, get people at the agreement table. And, you know, I'm sort of like standing back and saying I'm more of a practical utilitarian. So I could be a lot more tactful, but when it comes to people and their claims, I've been quite skeptical. So that's one thing I've been learning, is to be less forceful that way. At the same time, I think there's a bit of over triggering people that's not really necessary. And that was kind of the purpose of today's call. Barry got freaked out over me talking to another member, and we were trying to figure out ways to not have that happen. And Barry's justifying yelling as a tactic that's supposed to get through to someone's brain. I don't know, but that's kind of boring. But what's interesting is how could you navigate a conversation like that where we could agree that all together that that's not acceptable without having a ruler say so. Like, did Barry get any message today? I don't know, but next week is part 2. So this week was all about unwrapping it. If you watch, there'll be a video come out in a few days of the whole session today, suggestions of what we could do to have better synergy or whatever it is. I think you're responsible to make your own informed decision. I don't know if that's made sense. Did that seem to make sense, Barry and Alex? Is that a summation of what's going to happen next week? We're going to.
Maybe it depends on whether we get sidetracked. By the way, I consider myself a much better writer than a presenter. I mean, I have given talks and presentations, not at the level of TED, because I'm not that good as a stand-up presenter. I have given talks where I didn't actually give the talk. I simply asked questions of the people in the audience. And typically this is like 20, 30 people in a room. And I've had audiences construct the content of my talk slide by slide, where I asked a question and the people in the audience responded, and the response was in fact the next slide, which I would then put up after they responded. And I gave a talk, I think around 2000 or 2001, to a group of teachers, educators, and they constructed the exact talk slide by slide in response to my asking questions sequentially. And one person who had been attending that same conference every year since its founding for like 10 years, she came up to me afterwards and she says, "This is really the best talk at this conference." I said, "You mean in this session?" She says, No. I said, "You mean this year?" She says, "No." She says, "I've been coming here for 10 years. She says, "This is the best talk ever at this conference. And all I did was ask questions and let the people in the audience provide the content." And by the way, the questions were based on the Socratic method, what Colin calls street epistemology, what I call the Socratic method. It's asking questions and letting people contribute the answer.
I politely object to that alignment, although they have a lot in common. In fact, the guy today, street epistemology, they asked him if he thought he was a philosopher, and he says, "I'm the opposite of a philosopher." So if that gives you any indication, it's about getting the other person. But yeah, there's some nuance there that's worth gaining. But we can't do it in argument. We have to do it in examples.
If there is a difference, it escapes me. Charles, do you want to say something before we close out?
Yeah, you'll see that the fracking industry, they have their own opposition group set up beforehand. So when they go over to Ukraine, when they did that to, get fracking done over there, they not only had a group that sit there and was the pro fracking, but they set up a group of anti-fracking that was run by them to make arguments that would lose.
Yeah. Disingenuous dramatization.
But yeah, if you're able to sit there and manipulate the questions from the audience, it gets a lot more presentation. Also, you could add sound to it. I know a lot of people, they add do to give that brain the going and to get your juices going in your frontal lobe to make it so you'll believe what they have to say.
Yeah, that's what Colin calls the straw man approach. That you have a weak party presenting one side that's not the strong version of the other side, and then so it's easier to knock them down. And if you're naive in the audience, he sounds like this side really clobbered the other side, but the other side was unfairly represented, not by people who really believed in that side, but people who were faking it, misrepresenting, mischaracterizing the other side of the argument. And it's not easy to detect that. You have to be pretty sharp to recognize that tactic. But it happens.
Well, it's a political thing, right? It's the number one case. That's what he's talking about. Yeah.
Politics are not science. And politics and science are in many ways polar opposites.
No, there's a whole science behind how they manipulate the audience into believing what they want you to believe. You
An
know?
agnotology to figure it out.
You see it often in the mainstream media.
Yeah. And
That's a pretty good wrap.
that's this whole thing about critical thinking. I had a professor, a friend of mine, was a professor, tried to teach critical thinking because she was teaching journalism, and a journalist has to be good at critical thinking so you not get bamboozled, by people you're interviewing. Critical thinking is a really difficult skill, cognitive skill to get good at. So that's a good place to we can talk about critical thinking next week when we critically think about techniques for improving the quality of these conversations. I want to thank everybody who's still here for coming. Thanks, Sam, for organizing. And if you want to save the chat, don't forget to save the chat before we shut down. And everybody have a good Memorial Day, except Alex doesn't live in the United States, so he doesn't celebrate Memorial Day. And I guess not in Canada either, right? So everybody have a good weekend no matter what.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And I'll stop the recording and shut it down. I guess I just shut it down. All right, Sam, shutting it down.